Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto beats Sona in chess part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. It was quiet. It was a quiet filled with trepidation. Uzumaki Naruto didn't like that quiet one bit. At least that was what the young man concluded as he sat down to gather natural energy, especially when it regarded something that he deeply cared about. Kanehigakure. Last he saw it, it was not much more than a large crater on the ground. A barren wasteland, really. An empty area that once contained his home. The final clash with the leader of the Akatsuki was a very long and difficult battle, one that held very high stakes for both sides of the conflict. Naruto simply couldn't fail to defeat Pain. Everyone depended on him to win. He couldn't fail. He wouldn't fail. Eventually, after a long fight where the Kyuubi almost broke out of its seal due to the pain of losing another precious comrade, he emerged victorious, defeating the last path of Pain with the last bit of energy he had left in him, earning Konoha's safety. Except his fight didn't end there. Only the physical portion, the easier part. No matter how he looked at it, the blonde was emotionally battered after fighting Pain. His home was destroyed, his loved ones either badly wounded or dead, his sensei his master. Erosenin Naruto beats Sona in chess. He had to face the man that was responsible for all of his recent anguish and pain, to face him. For far more reasons than he cared to admit. For closure. For answers. To end this. All of this. Once and for all. A part of him was afraid though, what would he do when he faced the man? How would he react? After speaking to his father in his mindscape, he had to find out whether he could actually end the cycle that he spoke of, the cycle that helped to create this situation in the first place. Could he let go of the prospect of revenge when he met face to face with the man responsible for his suffering? So when he finally met the man he will come to know as Nagato, he very simply, almost lost it. This was him, the man who took away Erosenin, Kakashi-sensei, hurt his friends, destroyed his village, made him watch as another of his precious comrades fell to his ruthless attacks. Unforgivable. But he somehow managed to rein himself in order to listen to Nagato's story. To hear what pain he endured that made a student of Erosenin turn into this. He was glad that he listened. Nagato's tragic story helped give him the resolve to truly follow in his predecessor's footsteps. Naruto had no idea if he had the chops to do it, but now he was determined to follow through with his master's and father's wishes. The blonde would take up his father's dream, his mentor's dream, and bring peace to this world. Oh, he still wanted to be Hokage, and nothing was going to change that. But after seeing the after effects of what this cycle could do to people. A quicksilver image of the Uchiha crest flashed across his mind at that moment, hardening his already rock-solid determination. After seeing what hate could do to the person he considered a sibling. That's right, the young man murmured, determination stealing his voice. It's up to me now. I have to do my best to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. For everyone's sake. He would bring world peace, or his name wasn't Uzumaki Naruto. At least, that was the plan. After Nagato used the Geto, Rinne Tensei no Jutsu, Outer Path, Samsara of Heavenly Life Jutsu, to revive all of the people he has recently killed after he attacked Konoha, Konan took his body to be buried. And so here the shinobi was, gathering natural energy so that he could gather Senjutsu chakra. So Naruto quickly entered Sage mode, using it to help him sense whether all the inhabitants of Konoha were alive or not. To his immense relief, he sensed the chakra of his many friends and comrades. Meaning that. A happy grin split apart his face, relief loosening the tension from his frame. They're all alive, they're all okay. Nagato did it. He couldn't help but fist pump, cheering loudly, celebrating by himself as he forced himself upright. More than that, he could sense Kakashi-sensei moving towards him, closing the distance between them with great speed. In a pretty damn good mood, Naruto moved to meet him, unable to wait for what he hoped was a hero's welcome back home. Then he stopped in his tracks, toad-like eyes turned to another section of the forest, wary. Something to his right sensed off. What the hell is that? Naruto questioned out loud, unsure of what he was sensing. And where did it come from? I don't remember sensing this when I went Sage mode last time. The blonde just stared at that area, weighing in on how he should respond to this feeling. Honestly, after what he had just experienced, he wasn't exactly keen on anything that could possibly do damage to his already damaged village. And this feeling could just do that kind of damage. Or rather, he had no idea what it could do. And he'd much rather check it out and be doubly sure that what he was sensing wouldn't cause trouble than regret checking it later. So he did. Naruto turned on the spot and raced towards the sensation, zeroing in on it with his incredible sensing abilities. Moving at incredible speeds thanks to his senjutsu-enhanced body, regardless of his tired state. He was sure that, whatever it was, he could deal with it. That assurance was very much dashed by the time that he reached the aberration that caught his notice. In a small, insignificant piece of the forest, there was something that was really, really wrong. He was staring at it, studying it, suspicious of what it exactly was or where it came from. He couldn't really describe it, but if he had to call it anything, he supposed he would call it a fluctuation. As the very air that was emanating this sensation was shifting, as if space itself was rending. It was weird. Naruto already knew that Kakashi-sensei was coming towards him, so just in case this thing proved to be dangerous, the shinobi arbitrarily decided to check it out. Just a few moments ago, his teacher was dead. He was dead. He refused to place him, or anyone from Konoha for that matter, in danger. Especially after this recent ordeal. Bad mistake. The second that Naruto moved to touch the aberration, his hand was gripped by it, almost like he was caught in a vice grip. But the part that actually made him begin to panic was the fact that it began to pull. What the? Hey! Let go of my hand, damn it! Naruto cried out, as it slowly began to pull the blonde in despite all of his senjutsu-enhanced strength. He grit his teeth, smashing his feet onto the floor to slow down his force movement, and even began sticking his feet to the ground with chakra. It wasn't enough, as instead of slowing him down, all his actions accomplished to do was drag the ground with him. The shinobi tried to think of a way out of this predicament, but since his hand was unavailable, he couldn't use hand signs to utilize his Kage Bunshin no Jutsu to help him out. Let alone a Kawarimi no Jutsu. His hands were tied, metaphorically and literally in a way. That sucked. Shit! Naruto couldn't help but curse as his entire body began to get swallowed up whole, enveloping him as his sight began to darken at the edges of his vision. One of the last things that he would hear from the elemental nations in a long time was Kakashi-sensei's surprised shout. Naruto was falling. He was falling very, very fast. The air that was rushing past him could attest to that much. The blonde tried to slow down his descent by flailing his arms, but instead all he did was force his body to twirl around more erratically. So he was obviously way too disoriented to even think about using a jutsu to get out of this, and he couldn't even tell what was happening either, since the world was spinning around him so fast that he felt like he would vomit. He almost wished that he threw up instead of feeling the pain of crashing into the splash. Water. The body of liquid he landed in was sent splashing everywhere, going sky high from his impact and crashing against the area around it, overflowing a little bit thanks to the tiny tidal wave he created. Needless to say, the shinobi finally reached the end of his freefall, and he was overwhelmingly thankful that he had his sage mode on. Otherwise the fall could have ended up being a whole lot worse, and by that, he meant he would have ended up as a pancake. Not pretty. It took a few seconds for Naruto to poke his head up from the water, blinking rapidly in order to recalibrate himself to being upright again, before quickly taking a quick look around him to find out where he was. Trees. Pavement. Shell-shocked human beings. Was he still in Konoha? Or at least near the land of fire? Toad-like eyes shut themselves from the world as the blonde cursed under his breath, annoyed that he was sent on a ride into some weird area. Why couldn't he get a break? There's no way that I'm missing my hero's welcome, Databeo, Naruto stated with resolve, his focus on his surroundings as he tried to find out where he was. That can't be right. Naruto snapped his eyes open and forced himself up, refusing to believe what his incredible senses were telling him. There was just no way. It was impossible. Yet his senjutsu abilities couldn't just be wrong, right? The simple fact was that, outside of the still blubbering people he terrified, Naruto sensed a lot of people close by. So much so that he felt like they could have made their own village, really. But that wasn't the issue, the problem was something else entirely. He couldn't sense their chakra. Correction, he couldn't sense anything's chakra. All humans had chakra, Even if they weren't shinobi, they had it. Yet for some reason these people didn't. He should know. Ero-sennin made extra sure to jam that information down his throat. Bless his pervy soul. Anyways, Naruto couldn't sense a drop of chakra in anyone, which should be impossible because humans needed it to stay alive. It was tied to their life force, right? So the blonde quickly moved towards the shore, forgetting all about the pain of falling from who knows where and… Wait. Shit! The young man cried out, snapping his head towards the sky as he tried to find out if that aberration was still there. Wherever he was in the elemental nations, as strange as it was, that thing could at least be used to return back to Konoha, right? Except he couldn't. Not anymore. To his dismay, he couldn't sense that thing at all anymore. It was quite simply gone. Like it never existed in the first place. Well, there went that idea. How the hell was he supposed to get home then? Okay, he had to relax here, and he had to think, what could have happened to make that rift in the first place? Maybe he could try and make one himself? Basically, what happened today that didn't happen on every other day? Oh. The shinobi realized in a eureka moment, slamming his fist into the palm of his hand. People who were dead were brought back to life. That didn't usually happen, right? So all he had to do to reopen that rift was redo that jutsu. And to do that, all he needed was a pair of Rinnegan eyes. Naruto nodded with a confident smile. Those were very easy to obtain after all. And since that was the case, he would get back home without much trouble. As if… Naruto roared out, slamming his head into the ground with so much strength that it created little spider cracks. He completely ignored the ordinary folks that he horrified by his actions, far too distracted with his own problems to care at that moment. Damn it, Nagato! Naruto groaned out from his spot on the ground, with faux tears flowing down his cheeks at his predicament. His senpai under Ero-sennin pretty much screwed him without realizing it, though it was also probably his fault as well. Probably. Did a jutsu that brought people back to life have such weird side effects? Or was it something else that he just wasn't seeing? He had no clue, and unfortunately for him, he didn't have any jutsu that could do something as ridiculously impressive as bringing people back to life. Okay then, plan B. He would get back home by foot. The old-fashioned way it was then. Naruto finally forced himself up from the ground and immediately moved to resume his search, intent on finding out where he was so that he could have some idea of what he had to do to get home. The people that he accidentally terrified just watched the young man go, their collective eyes wide as he began to grumble to himself. No one would believe them when they told anyone else their story, so instead, a new folklore began on the very spot that the orange-loving boy landed on based on what the people there saw. The Lake of the Human Falling Star. It was a stupid legend, and everyone soon forgot about it. When Naruto finally saw the end of the tree lines, which itself signified the end of the park, though he had no idea it was a park, he grinned. Finally, he could see what he was dealing with. So he the blonde did just that and walked out of the park, eyes scanning to check the area. Ah. What the fuck is that? Naruto exclaimed out in shock, completely caught off guard by the rows upon rows of massive buildings that touched the sky. That wasn't the only reason why he reacted as he did, as the very people themselves that were occupying the area were wearing some of the most bizarre clothing he has ever seen. Well, sure, he wasn't the go-to guy to find out what the latest fashion was, but he was sure that this was bizarre for the elemental nations in general. Yeah, it was really strange. No chakra. Massive buildings, of which he's never seen before. Bizarre clothing, of which he's never seen before as well. A sinking feeling began to enter his stomach, knocking the air out of his lungs. Where was he? Because he was at least pretty sure that he wasn't anywhere near home anymore. And that realization stopped him cold, his expression going blank for a few seconds. Just as quickly as he went blank, though, the young shinobi snapped out of it and coughed, a smirk interlacing his features. Fine, the shinobi said with that very same smirk. If life wants to throw me for a loop, then I'll let it give it a shot. But I won't give up quite that easily. That was right. He's faced bigger challenges than this, and he has come out on top. He wouldn't get crushed by this, definitely not. With that determination in his hands, he glanced about himself, his confidence shaking slightly as another problem just hit him. Great. He had confidence. So what now? How the hell was he gonna get back home? Oh. Naruto piped up, answering his own question. Information. He needed info, and fast. To that end, the blonde quickly shuffled out so that speak to someone, hoping that whoever he spoke to could help him out. The first one that he locked on to was heading straight for him, moving at decent speeds while moving a wheel inside a metallic object on wheels. Figuring that it was the only way to get his attention, the blonde ran in front of the presumably mechanical vehicle, and waved his hands wildly. That definitely got the man's attention. Scree. The harsh sound of rubber sliding against concrete echoed around him, with the vehicle slowing down significantly before it could reach him. Beaming, Naruto walked up to the man, a question at the tip of his tongue. What the hell are you doing, you crazy brat? Are you trying to get yourself killed? So said the elderly man, apoplectic at the fact that a young man wearing a tattered orange jumpsuit ran in front of his car and nearly got ran over. But the spiky-haired teen completely ignored that, instead opting to ask his questions in a manner that reminded the normal human of a machine gun. Hey Ji-chan. I got a few questions for ya. Do you know where I am? Do you have any shinobi around here? What about a village leader? Or rather, do you have a map, cause that could actually be helpful. Wait. Before you answer that, can I first ask why you're using this thing? Couldn't you move faster running? I mean, yeah, you're pretty old, but I think you could use the exercise, Ji-chan. The elderly man heard exactly none of the questions that the blonde was spitting out. Instead, all he heard was Ji-chan. Listen, you rude brat, the normal human growled, annoyed at the teenager with terrible fashion sense. Move the hell out of the way or I will get the cops on your ass. Am I understood? This shook Naruto out of his not-so-subtle admiration of the car, as his impatience pushed him to begin inspecting the not-too-common sight of a vehicle. Especially since it was never really used for transportation back at the elemental nations. Actually, now that he thought about it, maybe he should avoid drawing attention to himself. Except he didn't realize that he was doing just that by both stopping the elderly man by running in front of a car, and continuing to molest the car in front of him. When the elderly man growled in anger again, Naruto took that as his cue to leave before he drew more attention to himself. So after walking away and letting the man go, the shinobi quickly decided that he needed to get information from another source than other humans, as it was obvious that he was gonna make an idiot out of himself at this rate. He would get back home. He had many promises to keep, as well as many people who were counting on him to bring peace to the elemental nations. More than that, he still had to become the Hokage. That's right, Naruto resolved, clenching his fist and sending it to the sky. I always keep my word, that's my nindo. And I will never give that up. And with that proclamation, the blonde brought his hands together to make a cross-shaped hand seal. He would learn more about this place, one way or another. At least that's what he said 2 months ago. God, just thinking about it pisses me off, Naruto complained lowly, his shoulders hunching over in his failure at getting back home. Yes, roughly 2 months has passed since the blonde first entered this strange land, with no way home in sight. On the bright side, he did manage to find out where he exactly was. To summarize, he was on an island nation called Japan, which was located on the Pacific Ocean near the main landmass of Asia, a continent that. Naruto slapped the front of his forehead, groaning at the fact that he almost did it again. Damn clones were too zealous with their search, and he accidentally got the same information several times over with different clones. Which meant that that specific line was stuck in his head whenever he thought about the word Japan, which was located on TH. Several pedestrians were shocked and a little worried about the strange young man that was currently bonking his head on the wall of a building. It took a few more bonks to get back to topic. When the blonde managed to stop, he continued on as if he wasn't just slamming his head against a wall. Anyways, while the clones were getting information, Naruto himself decided to be useful and tried to get some money. He couldn't live off of an empty pocket after all. He did some odd jobs here and there, which eventually forced him to create a new team of clones to henge into different people to get more money, as he very simply wasn't making enough with jobs that had bosses that didn't ask too many questions. The plan worked beautifully and he eventually got himself a decent-sized home for his new base of operations. Through means that probably weren't entirely legal, but at least he bought the damn thing. So no harm, no foul, right? At the very least, he didn't have to spend time in the parks anymore. The police kept kicking him out of the place. He had no idea that sleeping there would cause people problems. It was called a public area, wasn't it? Damn. He was still bitter about that. He felt lied to. Next time they shouldn't call it public if that was really the case. Anyways, he also got new clothes to better fit in with the people around him. Orange jumpsuits just weren't in fashion. A shame, really. No one could appreciate his tastes. They'd catch on though, he was sure of it. Nevertheless, he now usually sported a plain black t-shirt, a sleeveless burnt orange hoodie with a personalized red swirl at the back, dark blue jeans with a black belt, and a pair of white and blue sneakers. He tended to wear fingerless black gloves to complete his setup, just in case. Naruto was still Naruto. And Naruto sometimes got into some trouble, usually with some punks here and there. Outside of some small scuffles though, he pretty much stayed low, and it seemed like he would stay that way. At least that was the case, until recently. Unfortunately, while taking orders, a policeman entered the little restaurant where a clone of his was working as a waiter. While not wearing a henge, much to the blonde's simmering annoyance. That was the beginning of the end of his relatively free and peaceful life, made worse when he realized weeks later that he never questioned the events that were about to take place properly. But that was, obviously, something for later. The policeman apparently noticed how young his clone looked, and mentioned that he should be at school right now, pushing him to go despite any and all protests. At the time, his clone was horrified that he would be forced to spend money to go to school when he was working already, let alone the prospect of going to school at all. But very simply, the policeman would have none of it. If he was caught again, then he would get fined, and if he got fined, then he would get a record. Which meant that he would be in the system, and that definitely couldn't happen. So after grimly realizing that the cops in the area now probably have a rough idea of how he looked like after that, and that there was no way that he could permanently have a henge up whenever he left home without messing up once or twice, he decided to just go to the most dreaded of all institutions. Ku Academy was the closest high school available, and Naruto wasn't too picky, so he applied to go and was eventually accepted after forging some papers. And that was why the shinobi was heading back home, having woke up a little early to quit some of those odd jobs that he had before. He was heading back home to change into his new school uniform, preparing himself for his first day. The blonde almost vomited at the thought, already more than a little sick about the fact that he was going at all. Why does this shit happen to me? The teen wondered aloud, stuffing his hands into his pocket petulantly. It was a genuine question, with no real answer. As was the usual. Of course, after switching clothes to his stuffy school clothing, he began to make his trek towards his new and legal torture session. And, as per the usual for him, another problem became immediately apparent to him when he neared the horrible institution. Throughout the 2 months that he has been stuck in Japan, he has discovered a great many things that this world held secret. Especially from the unknowing human beings that casually lived their days in relative safe ignorance. It was probably better for everyone that way. Without any energy sources in their bodies, there was no real way of fighting back against other beings that did have such powers. Yes, there were other beings that existed besides the humans, staying hidden from them as much as he was. He discovered this fact completely by accident, mostly by accidentally entering zones where normal humans seem to avoid unconsciously. It probably had something to do with the barrier-like thing that they put into place when such fights began, of which he, in typical fashion, kept getting caught up in during his 2-month free roam. He still had no idea how he managed to remain anonymous after the first few brawls he got caught up in. He only knew of 2 groups so far, the people with the white wings and the people with black wings, which apparently hated one another. After hearing their hateful and biting insults aimed at one another, he eventually learned what they were called, angels and fallen angels respectively. Now, he didn't know why exactly they were fighting, but he was sure there was a reason. Probably. Nevertheless, the entire thing was bizarre, but at least it was good to know. There would be no unhealthy surprises for Uzumaki Naruto, thank you very much. Now, the problem with the school he was about to enter in was the fact that the very area seemed to be teeming with foreign energy. Foreign energy that he was not familiar with. Basically, there were more than just regular humans in Ko Academy. But he already enrolled by this point, and if he tried to back out now after he was already enlisted in the school role, then he would without a doubt attract attention to himself. Naruto clenched his fist, determination firing up his eyes as he made his decision while waiting to make his entrance. Since he couldn't force a clone to take his classes, for the obvious reason that any damage it took would make it pop, he would just have to attend this school normally for a little bit and remain anonymous. The blonde's ear perked up slightly when he heard his new teacher call his name from behind the door he was leaning on, giving him flashbacks of all of the times that Irika-sensei roared out his name in anger. Ah, good times. Now Naruto, with his new academy uniform unbuttoned with an orange shirt under it, knocked onto the door to announce his entrance. Just like that book on Japanese etiquette told him to do. Ah, how proud Bachan would be. Same could definitely be said for Sai, for that matter. Enter please, Uzumaki Naruto. The teacher repeated from inside the classroom, tone impatient after having to call twice. Naruto just grinned in response. It was about time for him to make an entrance, one that would give everyone a good impression of him from the beginning. If he was going to do this school thing again, then he was not gonna have a repeat of his Ninja Academy years, definitely not. So with that ambition in mind, the shinobi slid the door open and entered the classroom, making sure to take note of his soon-to-be classmates' expressions. Most of them were completely indifferent so far. Some girls gave him shy smiles and some of the boys gave him challenging stares for whatever reason. Weird. He didn't even do anything yet. The young man moved to stand in front of the chalkboard, preparing to give his introduction to what would be his class for the foreseeable future. Welp, he'd better make sure that everyone knew exactly what he was about. Yo! Naruto shouted without hesitation, an upbeat tone to his voice. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, my friends, those who are friendly to me, and those who I consider precious to me. I hope we can all be good friends, and if not, I will just beat you up so we could become good friends later, Databeo. To end his declaration, he made sure to give everyone a thumbs up and a winning smile, blinding everyone there with his happy demeanor. Though their reaction was not what he expected, as everyone present gave him incredulous looks, while outright gaping at him for his unknowingly provocative speech. Did he say something weird? The teacher eventually got over his own shock and coughed into his hand to get everyone's attention. That was nice, Uzumaki-san. Now can you please take the seat next to Nanaka-san near the window? The shinobi just blinked at the teacher's total lack of enthusiasm, but eventually shrugged it off and walked to the classmate he was directed to, figuring that there were simply some people that he couldn't get a rise out of. He'd break him in, he was sure of it. The girl he was directed to go to was wearing the typical female uniform of Ko Academy and was quite the pretty girl. It wasn't even something he noted out of admiration, it was simply a fact. She had neck-length light blue hair with a braid on the right side of her face and a white headband to keep her hair in order, despite the fact that she had an ahogue on the crown of her head. Her vivid yellow eyes, framed by the soft features on her face, locked onto him as he was making his way towards her. The girl, Nanaka was her name, nodded to him in acknowledgement as he sat down to her left near the window. First impression, a good person. Awesome. Despite this positive development, he still had to actually listen to a lecture by his new teacher, meaning that he had to do his best to not fall asleep from the lesson that was being thrust to him. He failed utterly. Naruto woke with a start with some drool on his chin, his eyes snapping to check his surroundings, only managing to take in the empty classroom that he was occupying. Oh shoot. The blonde forced himself up, a little confused and disgruntled, until he realized that he wasn't alone in the small room. Blue eyes moved to the right, catching the calm and collected gaze of his new class neighbor. Well, what happened? Where is everyone? Naruto asked, his words slurred as he tried to wake himself up. He forgot how ridiculously boring school was, but he was sure that not even Irika-sensei was that bad before. It was like watching paint dry with how entertaining it was to listen to the teacher's lecture. How long did he have to do this again? The period ended, Uzumaki-san, just now. Before he left, our teacher asked me to give you a little bit of a tour around the school since this was your first time here at Ko Academy. Nanaka stated simply, that calm air of hers firmly in place. Wait, the period ended? How long was he asleep exactly? Wait, more importantly, he couldn't have this girl just follow him wherever. He had his own ways of finding out more about places, and he didn't need a babysitter. Namely, clones. But he obviously couldn't do something like that near her. Hey, don't worry about it, I can find my way around just fine. Naruto explained with a cheesy grin on his face, confident, as always. He hoped that his words would convince the strangely stoic girl that he was fine, but his hopes were dashed by her next statement. I am the class representative, this is my duty, not a favor for you, Uzumaki-san, and I am adamant about completing my duties. Nanaka stated with her intense gaze staring him down. Naruto stared back. if only out of pure stubbornness, but he eventually gave in regardless. There was no point in arguing against something so small. He just let her have her cookie, and then do what he had to do afterwards. What did he have to lose? He would just be killing an hour, nothing important. Okay, you win, Nanaka-san, please lead the way, Databayo. Naruto relented easily, offering a small smile in order to hopefully lower her tension. It didn't work, as Nanaka just stared at him for a few spare seconds before she turned around and grabbed her bag to leave. The blonde watched her go, sweat dropping at her attitude, but followed after her regardless. So Nanaka followed through with what she was assigned to do, taking him around Ko Academy to see all that the high school had to offer, introducing him to all of the facilities and important areas. Naruto had to admit, he was impressed at the sheer size of the place, even though it was ostensibly just a high school so far. Though apparently there were other parts of the academy that extended beyond high school, though he wasn't sure. The entire tour took only about a half an hour due to her quick and efficient introductions to everything they saw, causing him to suspect that she wasn't that much happier to be there herself than he was. It didn't really offend him or anything though. He has gone through much worse and learned to not take things so personally as a young adult. Heck, he was sure that his 12-year-old self would demand what her problem was with him though. Uzumaki-san. Naruto blinked, forcing himself to come back to reality as he realized that he must have been musing to himself for a while, since Nanaka was just staring at him, waiting for an answer to whatever she had just said. He took a quick look around and realized that they were at the rooftop of the building, with a beautiful view of the rest of the academy grounds available to them. Actually, why were they even up here? Was this a part of the tour? Naruto then turned back to Nanaka, who was still waiting. Sorry, I was just thinking about something. Can you repeat whatever you just said? Nanaka sighed, but did as was asked and repeated herself. I said, is this a good place to stop the tour, Uzumaki-san? On much firmer ground now that he knew what was asked, he grinned and nodded. Yep. Thanks for showing me around the school, Nanaka-san. It was a real help. I'll see you around in class, alright? The shinobi was already in the midst of turning around as he was speaking, preparing to head out and escape from the confines of the school. He's had more than enough today. Wait. As demanded, the blonde did indeed wait, freezing himself from opening the door to enter the stairs to enter the building again. There is something that I wish to ask of you, Uzumaki-san. The young woman stated as much as asked, not exactly giving much room to deny what she was asking of him. Naruto turned around and looked at Nanaka, his own blue eyes connecting with her yellow ones, a hidden intensity hidden within their depths. Why was she looking at him like that? What are you, Uzumaki Naruto? Nanaka questioned, no, demanded with a new sharpness in her eyes and face. The shinobi took a step away from the teen, sensing some semblance of hostility from her, shocked at what she was asking. Indeed, her body took on a more aggressive tone as she spread her legs apart and clenched her fists, almost as if she was ready to fight with him at a moment's notice. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Nanaka-san? I must have misheard you. Naruto tried to clarify with a newfound nervousness, trying to reassure himself that the girl in front of him had no idea about the fact that he wasn't a normal human. Nanaka was completely human, of that he had no doubt, so it was impossible for her to learn of his abilities, right? But what if some humans could? Did he do something that gave him away? And who else possibly knew of his unique power? This wasn't good at all. Don't play stupid, Uzumaki-san. You seem to be human, but the reported energy that you've been giving off suggests otherwise, and an unknown variable cannot be tolerated during this point in time, Nanaka said with growing antagonism, voice firm. As she was speaking, a green aura began to envelop around her arms, a sword appearing from the energy, as well as a pair of metallic gauntlets that formed around her arms. I will ask you one more time, Uzumaki Naruto, what are you? Nanaka finished, her newly formed blade pointing at Naruto. Naruto just stared at her. The blade she just created was aimed at him with ease and confidence, with the poise befitting of a warrior. He made a mistake. He spent so much time focusing on non-human threats that he completely ignored the powerful humans that hid among the weak humans. This blunder can only be described by Naruto in one word. Fuck. As Naruto stared at Nanaka's blade, he had to remind himself of something vitally important. Something that he would definitely forget if he didn't remind himself constantly. It was a simple fact that most people wouldn't really think too much about, and something that Naruto was forced to think about ever since he realized that he wasn't anywhere near the elemental nations anymore. He was, without a doubt, a ninjutsu specialist. Now most people would think that this wasn't vital information, that this was more of a bit of trivia rather than anything truly important. Well, they would be wrong. Ninjutsu, in its purest form, was a ninja art that was geared towards the destruction of the enemy. It was, in every shape and form, all based on destroying the enemy by overpowering or overwhelming them. Ninjutsu was rarely, if ever, truly subtle or quiet. The fact that Kakashi-sensei's assassination ninjutsu was a lightning attack that was as plain as Naruto's orange clothing should be more than enough evidence of that. But more importantly, why does any of this matter? Well, that's because Naruto really didn't want to gather attention to himself. Ninjutsu would make him stand out like a sore thumb, drawing attention to himself thanks to ninjutsu's destructive capacity and stuff. That basically meant no Raisengans or any of their variants were allowed, or even too many clones, since too many copies of one person were bound to draw people's attention. Even while learning more about the world, he only had so many copies roaming the streets, while giving them different looks. He also had no idea how sensing among the supernatural worked either, so gathering natural energy for Sage Mode would be both time-consuming and eye-catching. Thus that left Naruto with one thing left: Taijutsu. Now, while Taijutsu wasn't Naruto's specialty, he wasn't a slouch in it anymore. He could now hold his own against Kakashi-sensei in Taijutsu, and he was fast enough to be a match for him as well. So that meant he was at least an A rank in those categories. It would have do for now. After Naruto was done with his mental checklist, he turned back to Nanaka and answered her. This may be difficult to believe, but I am a human. Though I don't know who you are or why you are pointing your sword at me, you should know that I don't attack someone unless they threaten someone that I care about. That, or I am attacked myself. He then lifted his chin, defiant. Basically, I won't threaten the normal students here. I give you my word on that, and I never go back on my word. To be blunt, the blonde really couldn't back down to her right now. No, he had to show her that he couldn't be bullied around. Then again, he also didn't want to antagonize her either. Well, hopefully he found a decent middle ground. Meanwhile, the human female continued to stare at the blonde, pondering his words. Was he really a human? No, that couldn't be true, right? Humans didn't contain strange and foreign energy signals. Unless it was a sacred gear? No, if that was the case, then the censor that tipped the higher-ups of her faction would have made note of it. This was new. Foreign. That meant that the being in front of her could very much be a new supernatural entity. And if that was the case, then were there more beings like him? Hidden from view to her faction and mostly unknown. A dangerous possibility. But more than that, did the human known as Uzumaki Naruto pose a threat to the humans in the area? Nanaka's thoughts raced around this person's strange energy and its possible implications, as was her duty in this academy. The hero tribe sent her to this academy as a watcher, which gave her two important responsibilities: to watch over the confirmed devils in the area while keeping a lookout for stray devils, and eliminating them if required. As was her duty as a hero. That being said, she has recently received two more objectives by her faction's leadership. To find and determine whether the new foreign energy that a censor of theirs has picked up near Ko Town was hostile to humanity or not, and to keep an eye out for the last descendant of the original Lucifer. The hero tribe's duty must be fulfilled for the sake of humanity, which it has safeguarded for 2,000 years as the best line of defense against the supernatural. The organization was said to have been founded by the God of the Bible and has since spread across the world to continue their mission in secrecy. None of the supernatural factions were aware of their presence, but they were aware of the heroes that they created throughout history. They were where humans with sacred gears were supposed to go if they wanted to fight instead of live normal lives. Things have changed, however. The introduction of the Devil's Evil Peace system has made recruiting new blood difficult, as many devils have snatched up any human with talent or a sacred gear like collectibles. The hero tribe, thus, had to keep better vigilance over the devils and the other supernatural factions to prevent their fellow humans from being reincarnated into what they saw as a slavery system. A sentiment that Nanaka nominally agreed with. Now, with this strange power in this ostensible human, there was another point of concern to the heroes of this world, one that, given their already difficult circumstances, they couldn't let pass. Which was why the young woman continued her intense stare, finally moving her sword away from his face after a few more tense moments. A green aura appearing on her arm once more, which took her armor and sword away from her. I will trust your word for now, Uzumaki-san. But if you give me a reason to doubt your sincerity, then I, Nanaka Yuki of the Hero Tribe, will end you. Nanaka Yuki stated with utmost certainty. After all, she was well trained, and she was sure that she could deal with whatever this boy could throw at her. Her warning to him was not really for her own benefit either, but more for the ordinary humans around them. For the sake of humanity. That was the duty of a hero after all. Naruto could have cried in relief, happy that he didn't have to show his hand in a school filled with supernatural beings. He could go back home and regroup from this unexpected wake-up call. Understood, Nanaka-san. I promise you that I won't cause any trouble here. In fact, I was forced into Ko because a police officer said I was too young to be working. So I'm not here of my own free will, you know? Naruto stated, in the hopes that she would see that he had no ulterior motives. Nanaka didn't bother to respond as she turned around to leave the rooftop, heading towards her next class since school was still ongoing. She just needed to make sure that Uzumaki wasn't a threat before he could be allowed to leave the premises. Moreover, how stupid did she take her for? There wasn't any kind of law in Japan that dictated that teenagers had to go to high school. Either he was lying, or he was tricked. Though, she was pretty confident that he was lying. Meanwhile, as the blonde watched the young woman leave, he couldn't help but believe that he seriously needed to get back to his house in order to figure out how to approach this new problem. Apparently there were also strong humans among the other strange creatures that inhabited this world, giving him more to worry about. He just couldn't catch a break here, could he? The worst part was that if this girl knew about him, then it was possible that other groups knew about him too. The blonde quickly left the rooftop in order to leave the academy and get back home, where he wouldn't feel like everyone was waiting for him to blow his cover. It was suffocating for someone like him to constantly be aware, forced to be on edge all of the damn time, and keep himself from standing out too much. It just wasn't what he was used to. Even if it was necessary, he still didn't like it one bit. He, very simply, needed to wind down a bit in a place that he could feel like himself without being constantly watched. Hopefully this would be the last incident with this world's supernatural that he would have for a while. Naruto quickly jogged at an average human pace towards the front of the academy, getting ready to leave, up until he muttered a curse under his breath. Unfortunately for him, he ran headfirst from one problem into another, this time in the form of one of those strange beings that he still didn't really know about yet. The girl in front of him was a teenager with black hair that has been shortened and shaped to a bob-cut style, with piercing violet eyes that were framed by a pair of glasses focusing on him as he approached. She wore the typical Ko Academy female uniform and had a petite figure, usually befitting one of her age. She went by the name of Shirtori Sona, the student council president of this academy, and quite possibly a supernatural being that he wanted absolutely nothing to do with. Uzumaki Naruto, the transfer student, Sona stated matter-of-factly, giving Naruto a sudden chill from her tone. It was the tone he was somewhat familiar with now, the tone of an upcoming lecture. But before Naruto could make an attempt to escape, the student council president continued. The transfer student that should be in class in order to continue his education, rather than roaming around the school, skipping class, and sleeping during lectures. By this point, Sona's glasses took in the reflection of light, which gave her a natural glare without having to make the expression for it. He had to admit, that was pretty cool. Listen, I had a good reason for it, Naruto began, before getting cut off by Sona again. I'm sure you have your reasons, Uzumaki-san, but attaining an education is your most important goal right now. It is what you should be focusing on so that you could become a good and prosperous citizen. This is for your future, Sona claimed with conviction. Naruto was momentarily stunned at the complete faith that she held in her statement, thrown off by it a bit. Admittedly, he wasn't sure what he should expect from these so-called supernatural beings. Were they just like humans, where some were good and some were bad? Or maybe they all fell into some sort of personality category? But so far, if he used her as a benchmark, maybe they all weren't so different from humans at all. He hoped so, that way, if push came to shove, then he could possibly reach an agreement with some of these people so that he didn't become their target. At least, that was a possible plan for the future. Thank you for your concern, Shitori-san. But I have to take care of my younger sister at home. So I have to leave school early. Naruto lied through his teeth. He was never a good liar to begin with, but this one was so bad that even he had to admit it. Well, maybe he can just have a clone henge into Naruto or something, in case suspicions arose later. The president raised an eyebrow, before a small smile grew on her face. Very well, Uzumaki-san, but keep up with your studies from here on out. Sona, apparently, approved of his actions, if her more supportive attitude was of any indication. To her, it was good that he wanted to go home and take care of a sibling, so she didn't want to stop him, but she also didn't want to encourage his lax behavior in regards to his studies. She, perhaps, had a soft spot for elder siblings, who rushed to take care of their younger siblings. Now, if only her own elder sister wasn't so embarrassing, then maybe. Thank you, Shitori-san. I'll see you later, alright? Naruto said loudly, desperate to make sure that he wouldn't be caught lying by getting out of there as soon as possible. He once more began to run at what he considered to be an average human speed, but what he considered average actually appeared to Sona as speeds that only the fastest human runner in the world, Usain Bolt, could achieve. Sona was, of course, shocked to see an ordinary teenage boy run so fast. Either the boy was a naturally gifted runner or perhaps he was something exceptional among his fellow humans. Regardless, that burst of impressive talent got her to ponder whether he could be a potential candidate for her peerage, as she had quite a few openings left to fill. She decided to look into the matter later, but first she had to have a conversation with her best friend, Rias, about potential candidates for their peerages, and how best to divide the spoils between them. Fair was fair after all. Looks like Ko Academy truly is a place where potential congregates, right, Tsubaki? Sona asked, at first to what seemed like no one in particular. Though it turned out not to be the case, as one of her closest friends, her queen, Shinra Tsubaki, appeared to the right side of the bespectacled girl without prompt. Tsubaki was a well-endowed young woman with straight black hair that reached her knees, along with heterochromic eyes, with her left eye and right eye being violet and light brown respectively. Her own glasses glinted in the light mysteriously as she regarded her king and responded. Yes, Uzumaki Naruto would indeed be an excellent addition to your peerage, Sona Kaishu. He seems to be a better prospect than Hayato Issei at the very least. The student council president narrowed her eyes faintly. Oh yes, the young man that Rias had her eye on, the one with the suspected sacred gear. Neither of them really knew what the boy held within him, and Sona disliked taking chances, especially when she considered that Hayato already had quite the reputation throughout the school already. It wasn't a good reputation. Which was why, so far, Uzumaki was the better choice for her. But first. Come, Tsubaki, we should be on our way, Rias is expecting us, Sona stated, turning around and heading towards the direction of the Occult Research Club building. They had much to discuss. Naruto was jogging his way back home, despite his impatience. After the run-in with Nanaki Yuki, he really didn't want to run the risk of tipping off his abilities to her, lest he incur the girl's suspicion and make a new enemy in the visage of this so-called hero tribe. Also, he had to find a place to train in order to prepare himself for what seemed like a probable conflict. Since he was busy gathering information on the world and the supernatural, he never really registered that he needed to train what with how noticeable that action would be. It seemed stupid as a matter of fact. Why would he ruin his anonymity by training every now and again when he wasn't in any danger? That, and he had no clue where he could find a place to train. But now, of course, there was at least one faction that knew that he wasn't normal, so he needed to get himself back into shape. Just in case. The only problem that he really had was that he was quite a bit slower, physically, and in reaction speed, than when he fought pain. He was regretting his decision now. That being said, it wasn't like he was weak or anything, he was more than positive that he was stronger and faster than most of these supernatural beings. It was more of a long-term problem than anything else. So, the best thing for him to do would be to find a nice forest near Ko Town, and use Fuinjutsu to hide his energy signal. Fuinjutsu. Fuinjutsu was something that he recently dabbled in, seeing as he had the tools necessary for it, and he practically had nothing better to do with his free time. The Fuinjutsu scrolls which Ero-sennin gave him for his training, which were left in a seal, always accessible to him, if he wanted it. Never touched while he was back at Konoha, far too concerned with real tangible power and strength than the mysterious art that his master was so advanced in. His perverted old man of a master forced him to keep it as a precaution, hoping that the blonde would, one day, try and do something with it. Naruto laughed it off at the time, but it turned out that the old pervert was a hell of a lot smarter than he gave him credit for. The shinobi twitched, becoming more somber at the thought. But then he shook his head, deciding to exit from that train of thought, knowing nothing good would come from it. First and foremost, he had to focus on finding a place to train. But before he even did that, he needed a nap, as well as a nice feast of ramen to cool his nerves. One could not train on an empty stomach after all. Night was rapidly approaching when Naruto woke up from his nap. As soon as he was lucid enough, the young man immediately began to gather all of his supplies and tools, aware that he should probably make the best of his training. Ero-sennin gave him quite a bit of paper slips to practice Fuinjutsu on, giving him plenty to practice on if he so wanted. He has actually learned about Fuinjutsu before, so he knew the basics, like how to make a paper bomb for instance. Though muffling energy signals were definitely a bit more complicated than that, and something that he, only recently, managed to nail down. Basically, he wasn't a master by any means, but he had a decent grasp on what to do. Naruto barely dabbled in Fuinjutsu back in his world, but now, in this world, it suddenly became much more important to learn about. Especially when he remembered all of the incredible things that Fuinjutsu could legitimately accomplish, which inspired him to actually, really, give it a shot. It was rough at first, but he thought that he was doing alright, all things considered. Though he doubted that he'd ever become good enough to use Fuinjutsu to head back home or anything, so that idea was out of the question. Naruto was still thinking about his actions throughout the last 2 months as he was putting on his casual clothes and walked outside, prepared to start his search. Since, by this point, it was quite dark, he decided to forego his usual practice of fitting in, and just began to jump across the rooftops at breakneck speeds. Thankfully, as he was moving, and after doing some brainstorming, the blonde quickly remembered that there was a forest-like area at the northwestern part of Ko Town, having passed by it when he entered the town in the first place. Perfect. Changing course slightly, the shinobi soared through the many buildings of the human settlement, reaching his destination in a matter of seconds. When he actually arrived, he quickly gave the forest around him a once-over, determining whether it would work for him. Not bad, nowhere near as impressive as Konoha's forests, but I doubt that any forest in this world can top that, Naruto said with a grin, as he decided to drop his supplies on the ground to begin. He needed to actually draw the seals that would suppress energy signals, one that would work for a decent enough area for his training. Thankfully, he had plenty of practice with his 2-month time frame. As soon as Naruto finished drawing those very seals, the blonde twitched, cut off from his work, as he felt something. It was a spike of energy from a ways away, supernatural energy, which he has gotten used to thanks to his 2-month stay in this world. At first, the shinobi didn't recognize it, but he did sense that, whatever it was further up north in the forest. For a few moments he stayed like this, trying to grasp at this feeling. Then it clicked in his head, an image of bat-like wings on an individual's back appearing in the forefront of his mind. He didn't know what it was called, but he did know which group this feeling belonged to. One of those weird supernatural creatures, devils. So magic? Maybe? He wasn't sure. Regardless, Naruto grabbed his supplies again and resealed them, taking them with him as he began sprinting to the source of the energy, frowning visibly. Whatever was out there, he had to check it out before he could begin any training. Besides, he was curious. Considering the spike of energy, maybe there was a fight sparking out ahead or something, which could actually be a good stress reliever for him to watch now that he thought about it. Naruto eventually ended his musings when he came upon a peculiar sight once he reached his destination, a battlefield. A battlefield that was recently made thanks to the people that were occupying this piece of the forest. And right in the middle of it were 2 females, who were very much surrounded. Standing back to back against one another, those 2 girls were amidst a virtual sea of creatures of all shapes and sizes, which were obviously here with deadly intentions. Among them, the shorter one was a short girl with childish features, with very risque clothing if it could be called that anyways. She wore what looked like a black leather top that only covered her up to her ribs, and 2 black straps crisscrossing to make an X over her stomach. She also wore pink and white striped stockings, as well as a pair of, quite visible, black underwear. Her long silver hair, which reached to the middle of her back, was flailing around as she jerked her head around her, and her purple eyes were glistening sharply at the dangerous situation that she found herself in. Naruto frowned, narrowing his eyes, studying her closer as he noticed something framing the crown of her head. Wait, were those horns? Naruto couldn't help but do a double take at the sight of the little horns on the girl's head, but quickly snapped himself out of it. Now really wasn't the time to stare. So, taking chance that was given to him in the apparent lull in the fighting, the blonde focused his attention on the other figure who, he assumed, to be the Silverette's partner. The other girl was far more, physically at least, likely to be around the blonde's age, and thankfully didn't make him feel like he was committing a crime by staring. She had vibrant red hair, which was partially pulled into two separate pigtails that were held together with a pair of long black strings, with the rest of her hair flowing freely down to her waist, framing her pink eyes. In terms of physique, she was practically the polar opposite of the other girl, as she had quite the voluptuous body, which was contained in a pink top that was hanging on her shoulders, and a frilly blue skirt to complete her ensemble. All in all, the duo was quite the interesting pair, one that most wouldn't see every day. And they were both clearly under great distress, since they were up against multiple monsters on all sides. Naruto stared at the two of them for a moment, stuck in indecision. If he wanted, he could just leave and pretend that this never happened. After all, they weren't his problem anyway. Hell, he didn't even know if they were good people or not, so maybe helping them could be a bad thing? He was supposed to lay low, so helping random people would just garner him attention from unnecessary people, and he has no guarantee that they were even worth the effort. The smart thing to do here was to turn away and pretend that he didn't see anything. Yeah, the smart thing. Sighing, the blonde swiftly took out a hidden kunai under his right sleeve, already knowing that he never was good at doing the smart thing. If things got rough for him for helping out others, then so be it. Much rather that, than bear with the guilt of abandoned people in need to monsters. Without making a sound, the shinobi charged in, intent on getting those girls out alive and unharmed. The first of the monsters that took notice of the blonde was an ugly half-human/half-fish monstrosity, which barely managed to notice him as it turned around, making an attempt at roaring out to grab the attention of the other beasts. It was far too slow. With eyes so sharp that it was unbefitting on the face of a teenaged boy, Naruto swiftly swung his fist at the stomach of the beast, knocking all of the air in the monster's body. With that done, he quickly and efficiently stabbed his kunai through the monster's throat, ending its life before it ever got the chance to warn its comrades. Unsurprisingly, the shinobi wasn't too concerned about mindless monsters, as he felt nothing but bloodlust from them. Not waste any time, he moved on to the next one, a man that had a pincer for a mouth and sharp claws for hands. A combo that was pretty damn gross if you asked him, but hey, it wasn't about to matter in about a second, as the shinobi finally decided to announce his presence to ally and foe alike in a true Naruto-like fashion. I hope you bastards didn't try and start the party without me, Naruto shouted in exuberance as the bug man quickly turned around, only to be met with steel for its trouble, as the kunai dug deep into its probable brain. The bug beast fell like a stone, with Naruto charging towards his next victim. As soon as Blonde's declaration rang out, it stopped the fighting that was about to start anew for a split second, long enough so that everyone there could acknowledge the newcomer in slight shock. That shock vanished for the monstrous creatures when they saw that two of their comrades were down, and who exactly was responsible. Two monsters quickly flew into a frenzy and charged the blonde, getting him to start a new round of clever in his mind quips, before he noticed that the third and final monster was about to take advantage of the girl's momentary distraction. "Oi, don't gawk at me! Look out!" Naruto shouted to them, breaking both of them out of their reverie. In alarm at the incoming attacks, they both moved to dodge the final monster's assault, but the redhead was too slow, and was stabbed by one of the monster's sharp legs right through her shoulder. "Mio-sama!" The little silver-haired girl cried out, charging forward to engage the final monster, her face twisting in worry. "Hang in there!" Right at that moment, Naruto realized that, while holding back was important, this was not the time for doing so, as those two were now barely holding out. So, with practiced ease, he dodged both the flying goblin's nose dive and the standing pit bull's hard fist, before channeling wind chakra through his kunai. In a blink, the shinobi moved to the side of both monsters, sliding, in order to line them both up for a shot. Without hesitation, he threw the kunai at speeds neither of the beasts could react to, and cleanly pierced both the pit bull and flying goblin through their chests. Both beasts fell in short order, though Naruto didn't actually see them fall, as he was already moving to back up the kid, confident enough in his skills to know that they were down. As the blonde ran towards the final monster, which was preoccupied with the scantily dressed girl, he brought out the kunai hidden in his shirt's left sleeve and channeled wind chakra through it as well. Ducked under the body of the strange hybrid of a spider and a woman, he sliced off each one of its legs before the monster even realized what had happened. When she did, however, it screamed out in pain and stumbled back on her stumps, giving the scantily clad girl the opening that she needed. The Silverette then brought her small fist out and smashed her fist at the Spider-Woman's body, sending it through a tree, practically taking it down and killing the monster instantly. And just like that, the little battle was over. Naruto wasn't focused on that, however, as he moved to the red-headed girl which had received the stab wound, face tight with slight worry. He wasn't a medic by any means, but thankfully, he did have a basic knowledge of some basics, thanks to being around Ba-chan and Sakura-chan. Taking a cursory glance, he quickly figured that the wound wasn't bad, it was superficial. Still, she was unconscious, though he doubted that it had much to do with the attack itself. As he was checking her out, he quickly noticed the dark bags that were under her eyes, making his lips flatten. The girl was exhausted. If she was already at the brink before she actually got stabbed, then that could have probably made her collapse thanks to sudden the pain, shocking her system enough to knock her out cold. In short, she needed rest desperately. While this was happening, the Silverette cautiously moved to the blonde man's side, anxiously waiting for whatever he had to say. The two of them were in a bad spot, so while she didn't trust him completely, he did prove to, at least, want them alive. Something that she couldn't say that a lot of people wanted. More than that, he helped them fight off a lot of stray devils when it would have been easier to just stay out of the whole affair altogether. Plus, if she really thought about it, she doubted she could really do anything to stop him anyway, since the skills he used to take out the insane devils were outside of her abilities. Unless she used her trump card, but she wasn't willing to risk it with Mio-sama in such a state. The girl is fine, just tired, the wound ain't too serious either, so she will be alright as long as she gets some rest and cleans up the wound. Naruto finally spoke up with a small smile of reassurance. The girl let out a sigh of relief at the news and nodded her thanks, moving to her young charge in order to pick her up with her strength. In the process of this, she was going to thank their savior properly, before she froze up. Naruto frowned at the Silverette's sudden reaction, becoming wary of another attack. What's wrong? Are there more of them? No, it isn't that. The girl with the horns replied, her eyebrows scrunching as she pondered on their bad position. The reason that she was locking up was simple, the both of them were moving around during the middle of the night for good reason, unfortunately, as their last refuge was found out by the very stray devils that were hunting them down. No doubt to them, they were probably just like two tasty snacks to be devoured. If they returned to their last refuge now, then she had no doubt that they would be attacked by even more stray devils, especially the ones that were instinctively looking to raise their own strength. Her young charge was half human, and the unique smell that she had thanks to her ancestry helped attract stray devils from quite the distance away to her, in the hopes that they could eat what they viewed as a delicacy. Not only that, but the redhead was also unconscious. Before she could fall into despair due to their situation, an idea sprang to mind, which could probably buy them some reprieve, a temporary home. A safe place to rest. Internally preparing herself, she quickly turned to their blonde savior and pitched her idea. Hopeful. My young charge is wounded and unconscious, while I am tired from the day's fight. Taking that into account, I'd like to ask you whether you could offer us a temporary home where we could recuperate. In return for this favor, I wouldn't mind doing whatever you want for payment. Even as she was speaking, she was cringing at the possible degrading things that she may have to endure, well aware that offering herself up like that could very well remove the young man's inhibitions. But it was fine, as long as it was for her charge's sake. She was her guardian, and even if she rarely conversed with her, she was still someone that she would guard, no matter what. Which was why she was locking eyes intensely with the blonde, showing him her grim determination. Naruto didn't say anything at first, the only cues being that he raised his arm up slowly into the air, hanging there, as if he was raising his hand for the teacher to call him. Then he suddenly swiped his arm back down, slamming his hand down onto the Silverette's skull. Hard. The girl yelped as she face-planted onto the ground with a comical bump upside her head, recovering after a spare second as she looked up at the blonde with teary eyes. He didn't look amused. The shinobi, for his part, was very upset at the thought that someone would think that he was heartless enough to take advantage of the situation. Among the duo, the redhead was out cold and needed rest, while her guardian was exhausted, leaving both incredibly vulnerable in the middle of the forest where they could get attacked again. For all intents and purposes, he was going to offer them a place to stay anyway. Plans to lay low and avoid garnering attention to himself be damned when he saw good people in such a desperate situation. Despite his anger, however, he couldn't help but be impressed by the Silverette's actions, as she obviously hated what she was doing, but still did it anyway for her friend. Who wouldn't respect something like that? Why don't you try asking nicely next time, HM? Naruto questioned, his eyes now reflecting how many points she had won with him. The girl in question blinked in shock, before trying again, hoping against hope. Will you please give us a place to stay so that my friend here can get better, please? Sure, Naruto replied cheerfully, nearly making the girl faceplant with how easy it was. Now introductions. Something simple. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Your turn. Huh. Oh. Well, my name is Naruto Maria, and the unconscious girl here is my charge, Naruto Mio. The now dubbed Maria said, a growing smile splitting her face. Naruto blinked at that. The redhead was Maria's charge? Huh. This world kept getting weirder and weirder. Shaking his head, the shinobi scooped up the unconscious Mio and turned to the direction of his home, walking towards it with Maria following in tow, nonchalant about his current situation. It wasn't like helping two random people that were involved in the supernatural would get the world's attention anyway, right? So no harm done. Oh, by the way, Mio-sama is the daughter of the previous Mao Lucifer, so please make sure she is safe. I'm counting on you, Naruto-sama. Maria piped up cheerfully, moving up to the blonde and walking side by side to him. Naruto suddenly froze, only just registering what she had said. Eh? Yellow eyes locked onto the screen of her cell phone, which was ringing, the caller ID identifying who it was. Things have changed dramatically since earlier that day, and required her to contact the hero tribe's leader so that he could be aware of the exact circumstances, at least before she could proceed with anything. In the northwestern area of Ko Town, there was a forest area that was perfect for someone who didn't want to be found to do some exercises. Keeping in shape was paramount for her career as a hero. Yet, as she was in that forest, she very quickly found that she wasn't alone in the area. Before she could even start back then, something quickly caught her attention, distracting her from her training. It was noise, a lot of noise. Specifically, it was the extraordinarily familiar sound of battle that caught her ear. Opting to go and check out what was going on, she sped towards the source of the sound while trying not to alert the combatants to her presence, cautious. What she would run into was a scene of a battle, one where two females were holding their own against a small group of stray devils. Before she could even do anything productive, a certain blonde would enter the fray, turning the tide of the fight and saving the two girls. She was barely able to hear what they were conversing about, but she managed to catch enough to quickly determine that the redhead among them was, in fact, one of her targets. And her other target, the blonde troublemaker himself, had just thrown his lot in with them. This was simply the worst possible scenario. Two of her targets were now seemingly allied with one another for whatever reason. And of all of the possible scenarios that could have occurred over the, internally dubbed, unknown variable, the absolute worst has occurred. It was one thing to deal with the first Mao Lucifer's final daughter and her guardian, as their abilities were, she figured, not too impressive when all things were considered. But Uzumaki Naruto, on the other hand. She knew that he had a massive source of power, but she thought that he never really got the chance to learn how to use it properly. So, initially, he didn't really seem like a threat. At least, before she saw the thorough slaughter that the blonde had engineered against the stray devils. He was, without a doubt, someone to be wary of. Ostensibly, though, if his rush to help the two devils were of any indication, he was probably aware of their relations. Which could only mean that the blonde was aware of the supernatural by the time that she talked to him. This thesis was backed up by his complete lack of surprise by the sight of the many stray devils, as well as his confidence in dealing with them. Thankfully, Uzumaki's focus on the battle most definitely allowed her to study him, so she had to thank her good fortune. Because now she could, mostly, determine how powerful the teenaged boy really was. If that incident was an accurate representation of his skills at least. Still, what really bothered her? Even as she was thinking it, her yellow eyes were hardening. Uzumaki Naruto had broke his word. He claimed that he wouldn't do anything to harm the normal students in the academy? Well, now that he's thrown his lot in with those devils, he's effectively done just that. Devils and humans had never got along. Especially since devils have always tried to control humans for their own gains. She had no doubt that the two devils in Ko Academy were the same. More than that, she was a warrior with a sense of honor, and Uzumaki had broke that sacred honor. Willingly and irrevocably. He was trash to her now. But he was still very powerful trash, so, for that reason alone, she was contacting her superior. Her musings ended when someone on the other line picked up the phone and answered. Yuki-kun. Anything to report? Straight and to the point, good. There have been complications with the new targets you gave me. The former Mao's daughter has allied herself with the unknown variable that you told me about, and that variable has turned out to be very strong. Nanaka Yuki stated with a frown, obviously displeased at the turn of events. The voice on the other end paused, taking in this information, before responding. I see. Well then, I'll ask you one question, Yuki-kun. If he's truly that powerful, then I'd prefer it if you didn't face this unknown variable by yourself. However, if you think you can, I'll give you the go-ahead. So, can you do it? The masculine voice on the other line asked, serious. Yuki took a moment to ponder that. Both of the devils were weakened after their fight, which left them as nothing more than burdens rather than reliable comrades. That only left Uzumaki. He was faster than her no doubt, but from what she saw, it wasn't by much. She had fought with speed types before, and she had no doubt that Uzumaki Naruto was a speed type. More than that, he was a short-range fighter, and heavily depended on those two strange knives that he utilized. She now knew how he fought, while Uzumaki had no idea how she fought. The young hero clenched her fist, remembering her duty. Her training. She was a soldier, and she would do her duty. I can do it. Yuki claimed with conviction, prepared to eliminate Uzumaki Naruto if he gave her a reason to doubt his word. Very well, you have my permission to continue forward. The masculine voice stated in a firm voice. Your main objective is Uzumaki Naruto, since the daughter of the original Lucifer is being hunted down by the fervent supporters of the recently made government in the underworld, so best to focus on watching her. She will probably die in time, but this unknown variable must be dealt with, understood? Yuki nodded in understanding, recalling what she has heard about the situation in the underworld. Apparently, only recently has the previous Lucifer actually been caught and executed by the underworld's government after he escaped from his defeat at the hands of Sirzex Gremry and his comrades. Now, while the current Yandai Mao don't support the Zealots, they really couldn't do much about it, even if they tried to force the issue. The group was pretty popular with those that wanted to completely prevent any possible counter-revolution from occurring. Many devils who have found themselves at the receiving end of the original Lucifer's heavy hand in the past now had a perfect scapegoat in his daughter, and despite how relatively unknown she was, they continued searching for her. Of course, outlawing such a disorganized group would only draw angry mobs without actually stopping it from continuing its work, business as usual. So they didn't, and the hero tribe only recently got their hands on such information, but it was definitely valuable in determining who was the more important target. I won't fail, was all Yuki said before hanging up the phone. To an outside observer, the chess game between Rias Gremry and Sona Citri, both of whom were among the most popular girls in Ko Academy, was just a friendly game between friends. In most cases, if you saw two childhood friends play chess, then you'd be right. This time, however, they just so happened to be giving each other death glares as their natural competitiveness took over. It didn't help that they were the respective leaders of their own clubs, which were used to hide their devil activities from normal human eyes. The peerages of both of the kings were present as well, displaying varying degrees of amusement at their usually mature leaders acting like children, squabbling with one another. Though, at the moment, Sona was looking on in thinly veiled amusement as she watched her friend try to find a way to protect her king piece without losing her last rook. So, how is your investigation going along? The one about your potential new peerage member Rias? Blue-green eyes shifted from the board to the violet ones of the student council president in annoyance. Her lack of available moves on the chess board was getting to her. The bespectacled girl quirked an eyebrow, patiently waiting for a response as she gave her rival a chance to concentrate on her next move. It's rather difficult to discern currently, Sona. But that's alright, since I have already asked Kaneko-chan here to use her strong nose to check his scent, in the hopes that it could give us a clue to what his sacred gear actually is. Rias eventually claimed, a noticeably growing smile lighting up her face. Sona noticed Rias' growing happiness and couldn't stop her curiosity from growing along with it, wondering what Rias' resident rook found out. Yet, despite her growing interest, she didn't want to lose by admitting as much to her rival. So she held her tongue and concentrated on the chess game, her violet eyes crinkling in slight annoyance. Thankfully, Tsubaki, her queen, noticed her reticence and decided to do the honors herself, saving her from her admittedly childish dilemma. What did Kaneko-san find exactly, Rias-sama? Tsubaki asked, earning a pout from the young gremry, disappointed that Sona herself didn't admit to her curiosity. Beside her, Rias Queen began to giggle at her king's antics. She really was too cute sometimes. Rias, are you upset that Tsubaki-san asked you and Sona-chan didn't? Asked Himejima Akino with a sly smile, the second most popular girl in Ko Academy. Rias glared at her queen through the side of her eye, before ignoring her question entirely, which in turn just made Akino break out into a new round of giggles. The redhead shifted her attention to her rook, Tuja Kaneko, and motioned her to come to her. Tuja Kaneko stepped up to her king, ready to give her report on the person that she has now dubbed as the pervert. Bucho asked me to use my enhanced sense of smell to check what sacred gear the pervert had the other day. I managed to get close to him yesterday while the pervert was away running from the swimming club again. Even as she was speaking, the end of her lips were twisting downwards, expressing her displeasure without words. Now most people would think that she was only a little upset over Haida Issei's actions, but anyone who knew her also knew that even the smallest amount of emotion out of the usually stoic girl was very indicative of her mood. In short, she was less than enthused by the perverted boy's actions. Please continue, Kaneko-chan. Rias encouraged, her growing grin hinting to how much she was going to enjoy her friend's reaction. Kaneko nodded and continued. When I got close to the pervert, I managed to catch his scent, which I recognized as. She hesitated there, unsure if she was sure in her assessment or not. Still, she soldiered on regardless. A dragon. Kaneko finished, while maintaining her standard monotone voice. Completely unlike her though, Rias, for her part, responded with a full-blown victorious grin thanks to the information's implications. And if the widening of a pair of violet eyes were any indication, then those implications were big news indeed. Dragons were legendary creatures of immense power and prestige, so much so in fact, that the sacred gears that were based off of them were all quite powerful. More than that, very precious few sacred gears could smell like a dragon, which helped narrow down the possibilities. Rias may have just hit the jackpot. Sona couldn't help but curse internally, more than a little put out that she didn't put more effort in finding out what that boy carried. That being said, it wasn't like she would have tried to pull him into her peerage or anything, but, at the very least, she could have bargained with her friend/rival for the right to recruit the young man. Despite how childish it sounded, there was a reason for her frustration. Essentially, there was an unspoken rule between them in regards to the acquisition of new peerage members in and around Ko Town. That rule went along with the idea of finders keepers, where the one who finds a prospective peerage member with a lot of promise is allowed to convince them into their group without the other's interference. Unless, of course, they negotiate between themselves about who has the right to get a shot first. If she found Haida Issei first, then she could have earned a favor from her friend, for use in the future. It's always best to have an eye to the future, just in case. Yet Rias found Issei first, and now held the right to recruit him into her peerage, so it was too late for any sly attempts at forcing the redhead's hand. Sona sighed as she peered at the chessboard again, registering all of the possible moves that could lead her to victory in their game, wondering what play she should make. Then it hit her. More precisely, the image of a certain blonde student with blue eyes and strange whisker marks hit her. All at once, the young black-haired girl did a 180 in attitude as she decided to broach the subject with her friend, fully expecting to ruin her victory parade before it really began. Such was her competitiveness with her. While I am happy for your success in finding a new peerage member, Rias, there is something that I have to discuss with you before you celebrate. Sona stated seriously, knowing full well that, all games aside, they should discuss about any strange happenings that occur in Ko Town, especially in Ko Academy. Rias' expression switched from lighthearted to straight-faced in a second, understanding that playtime was over. I have recently met a new transfer student to Ko Academy today. At first glance, he seemed to be a normal human teenager, but he did something afterwards that made me suspect that he wasn't quite normal. Sona explained, as the light caught her glasses, giving her a foreboding look. Deciding to ignore that, her friend responded. Who is this boy? What tipped you off to this, Sona? Looking at Rias straight in the eye, she responded. His name was Uzumaki Naruto, and he was a second-year student. I met him while he was trying to leave the academy grounds, and lectured him on his lackluster effort with his classes before he mentioned that he had a family emergency. The young Citri cut herself off from there, stopping herself from revealing what the family emergency entailed, as that was personal information that Uzumaki gave her. As the student council president, she had a responsibility to not give out that information to others unless they wanted her to. Meanwhile, Rias frowned, not really seeing anything too suspicious about this boy's behavior. At least nothing totally abnormal that couldn't be explained away. It was only after our little talk ended that he did something unnatural. The student council president continued, violet eyes focused. As he was moving to leave the academy, I noticed that he was moving at speeds that a normal human teenager shouldn't be able to, which was made worse when he didn't appear to be particularly tired afterwards. If anything, her friends frowned deepened further. How fast? Sona didn't bat an eye. As fast, if not faster, than the fastest normal human in the world. Now that made Rias more attentive to her fellow devil's claim, very much seeing how she could be suspicious of how normal this boy was. Do you sense anything different about him? Nothing. Sona answered clearly, figuring that she meant that in a literal manner. It really was strange too, as the blonde had 3 of those whisker-like lines on his cheeks, something that was definitely not normal by any means. Yet she didn't sense the energy of the yokai within him, so he wasn't a fox or cat yokai or anything. That only left one possible explanation for this then. You think he has a sacred gear, a powerful one at that, I expect. Rias murmured with growing realization, interpreting her rival's mindset. Most sacred gears stayed dormant inside humans for their entire lives without notice, allowing them to continue to live their lives as normal beings. However, some sacred gears were so powerful that they actively aided the holder despite being dormant in their soul. Yet only the most powerful of sacred gears could possibly do something like that, which meant that this Naruto could very well have enormous potential. So you've been quite busy yourself, Sona? The red-headed devil asked with a knowing smile, a smile which had the student council president narrow her eyes. That smile meant that the young devil had a decidedly good idea, and in such a situation, where they were talking about an individual that had enormous potential, that smile was nothing except bad news for her. Hey Sona? Do you remember that favor that you owe me in regards to Tsubaki? I would like to cash it in. Rias expressed with a cheerful smile. Sona felt her eyes widen at her friend's words, before sighing and placing her hand on the top of her forehead, already figuring out what was coming next. The reason she even shared this information with Rias in the first place was due to the fact that finders keepers would be in place, allowing her to lay claim to grabbing the strange blonde without interference. If the rule wasn't in place, then she would have kept quiet about it until she learned more about the blonde. The 2 childhood friends were also rivals after all. But now it seemed that her rival has decided to change the standard rules of the game, invoking her favor. That favor in question was in regards to Rias' aid in helping Sona acquire her first peerage member in Shinra Tsubaki. When they were younger, apparently, Rias stumbled upon Sona's future queen after the incident where Rias acquired her own queen, thanks to the actions of a particularly rowdy group of exorcists. Exorcist groups that were closely involved with the Japanese Shinto gods. Among those exorcist groups were the Himejima clan, who were considered to be among the most powerful and influential family of exorcists in Japan. Back then, that clan, after a long series of complicated events, were hunting down Rias' queen, Akino, who was related to the clan's leadership and exiled. Rias personally intervened on her future friend's behalf, forcing the clan to the bargaining table in order to get them off of her back. Before she even brought them to the talks though, it appeared that the Himejima clan had managed to inform the other, less influential, exorcist clans of their plight, mobilizing them in the name of protecting their purity. So the Himejima needed to inform the other clans of the new development, otherwise Akino would continue to be hunted down by the Shinto-aligned exorcists. It was then, during the meeting between Rias and the disparate Shinto-aligned groups, that the young devil would meet Shinra Tsubaki, a girl from the relatively undistinguished Shinra clan. A girl who was isolated due to her power of attracting supernatural beings. Honestly, back then, Rias would have taken her as another peerage member herself, but then she remembered something. Her friend and rival, Sona, was currently lacking of peerage members at the time. Add to the fact that Rias herself had her hands full in making sure Akino would join her without the Himejima clan's interference, and she figured that her friend could give Tsubaki a shot instead. The rest, as they say, is history. Though she did earn a favor from Sona, thanks to that little tidbit. Rias somewhat regretted her decision later on though, since in only a year later, she would be faced with a threat that would need to build up her peerage to become as formidable as possible. Which was why she was invoking her favor now, several years later, for this boy. This is highly irregular, Rias. Isn't there something else that you'd like to request of me as a favor? Sona asked with a twitching eyebrow, her irritation becoming obvious. For Rias to use that favor, which she held over her head for the past several years now, of all times. Unfortunately, I would like to use it now. I'm sure you that are relieved that you don't have to worry about Uzumaki Naruto anymore, since I'm going to take him off your hands now. The young Gremory stated blithely, grinning from ear to ear as she finally made her move on the chessboard. Sona just groaned, and moved her rook to capture Rias' king, winning the chess game without much effort. Yet, somehow, even though she knew she won this game, she still felt like she lost. It was an irony that was annoying to think about. Naruto just stared across the table at the two recent newcomers, present in what he considered to be his home base. His home away from home, his safe zone, the place where he can let Uzumaki Naruto reign free once more. Well, at least it used to be. Blue Eyes regarded a pair of pink and purple eyes coolly, aware that the individuals who own those eyes have thoroughly destroyed any hope of him keeping his anonymity by their sheer presence. To be honest, he was still kind of in shock. What exactly has he got himself into this time exactly? These two girls have recently told him their story, how Maria was a succubus devil hybrid, and how Mio was a hybrid of a devil and a human. Hell, he didn't know that hybrids were a thing until now, such was his ignorance. But the redhead, she wasn't just any kind of half-devil, she was the daughter of Lucifer. The real Lucifer, the one that he read so much about through his clones, and apparently, the former leader of the devil faction in the underworld. Naruto's Mio was the daughter of a Mao that was overthrown in a civil war, where dark feelings about the first Lucifer were no doubt still festering in the hearts of the winning faction. He picked the absolute worst person to offer a home to. But the fact was that it happened, nothing could change that now. And now that he had offered his home as a safety net against their enemies, Uzumaki Naruto would keep them safe, at least until they were able to move on their own. Hopefully this entire incident would blow over without anyone noticing. At least he seriously hoped so. Okay, before any of you assume anything, I'm not about to kick either of you out now that Mio-san here is awake. Naruto reassured easily, sensing how tense his two guests were by their squared shoulders. Considering how the tension immediately left their shoulders following his statement, it was obvious that both of the half-devils were immensely relieved. Besides, he knew full well that even if Mio was conscious now, and Maria was now no longer sleep-deprived, they were both still not at 100%. Not only that, but they could both be attacked by stray devils again if they didn't have a secure place to rest at. Speaking of which. Quick question, why were the stray devils hunting you specifically? Naruto asked, curious on why so many of these, apparently, mindless creatures managed to hunt them down. Maria tilted her head in confusion. Didn't I mention that Mio-sama's unique smell attracts such beasts to her? Since she is the daughter of the first Lucifer, she naturally attracts stray devils since they sense the hidden power inside of her. Unfortunately, since she is part human and still new to her powers, the monsters she attracts try to eat her since they think that she's delicious meat. You didn't have to put it like that. The redhead grumbled in soft protest. The succubus sweat dropped by this point, shrugging helplessly at her usually reserved charge. Although she seemed to be taking the situation lightly, she actually was genuinely worried whether the stray devils would drive them from this new temporary home of theirs. Just like every other time they tried to settle down somewhere. Before she could even voice her worries to Naruto, however, the blonde spoke up again. Good thing then, that this house is protected with my... Naruto cut himself off abruptly, realizing what he was about to say, much to his chagrin. No matter how he looked at it, it was even harder to hide his identity while he was in his own home. This was somewhere where he was comfortable, and that loosened his guard in regards to his willingness to talk about things that, normally, wouldn't be too bad to share in his world. Before Naruto could try to do something to salvage his blunder, Mio supplied him with a means to do just that. Did you mean to say magic, Naruto-san? The shinobi blinked, and focused his gaze on the redhead, quietly studying her. She was unconscious when Naruto and Maria initially met each other face to face, as well as their subsequent conversation. Now that he was looking at her, especially as she cautiously shifted her gaze away from him, he could quickly figure something out about her. She was scared of him. He supposed that made sense, since the last memory that she had of him probably revolved around his killing of those stray devils. That was not exactly the best of impressions possible to a young girl like her. A belief which turned out to be exactly correct. Naruto's Mio was a young girl that has lived a normal life mere months prior to this moment, and was, frankly, more than a little wary of the young man that killed those beasts without a care. Yeah, they were mindless monsters, but still. That being said, Maria seemed to have gotten a good impression of this man while she was out, and she trusted her guardian's advice. After all, she would be dead without it guiding her when her foster parents were killed. The redhead winced at the thought, still smarting from the fact, but quickly swallowed it down. Meanwhile, Naruto took the lifeline that was given to him, accepting Mio's help. Yeah, magic. Exactly that. Sorry about that, but I rarely talk about my powers to others, so it's a bit weird to talk about this. Even while he was speaking, the young man was nervously scratching his head, a gesture which was filled with nervous energy that needed to be removed. Apparently, Maria took it as a sheepish apology. No need to apologize, it is understandable, Naruto-sama, Maria said with a smile, cheerful. Naruto twitched, feeling that the sama honorific was a bit too much, as he really wasn't used to such formal ways of speaking even if he was forced to use san more often so that he didn't stand out. But he had to ignore that for the moment in order to address something more important. Ground rules. Alright, since we are going to live with one another for a while, I have a couple of rules that both of you need to follow, since this is my home and you're crashing here for a while. Naruto stated clearly, leaving no room for interpretation. Both girls nodded in understanding, grateful to even be having a place to crash at all. First, don't practice any of your magic inside the house, unless it doesn't blow up. Second, both of you will have some chores to do to pay me back for freeloading. Last and most important, do not go into my room under any circumstances. We clear? The shinobi emphasized, trying to be unwavering on these points. To be truthful though, the chores thing was something that he just made up on the spot while he was thinking about the rules that he could place. He usually forced his clones to keep the place nice and tidy before now, but now that these two were living here, he didn't have to use that anymore. This was his way of getting out of doing chores himself. But the last rule was very important to emphasize since his room now carried all of his ninja gear and scrolls. All of which he managed to scrounge up after his surprise entry into this world. It also held all of the numerous records of possible leads that could possibly help him get back home, but so far, the only one that proved somewhat successful was the Kuchios no Jutsu for his contract with the Toads. It didn't work. Or rather, he required an exorbitant amount of chakra to use it when compared to the amount he needed back home, and considering how large his chakra reserves were, that really was saying something. The most he was able to summon was a tadpole, which took up to 25% of his chakra. Maybe he was too far away from home to use the Kuchios no Jutsu? Well, at least he's done one smart thing today. Once upon a time, all of his materials and notes were sprawled across the living room haphazardly, but thanks to some quick thinking, he changed that. When Maria wasn't looking, he made a clone and forced it to race back home in order to clean everything up, put it into his room, and lock it up with some seals that reinforced the door, hiding them from view. He didn't mind if people thought that he was a strong magician, but if people figured out that he wasn't from this world, then that was something different entirely. Maybe it was the fact that his clones saw too many alien books and movies, but he was still pretty sure that people would want to catch him in order to do experiments on him. The blonde shivered slightly just thinking about it, nursing his newfound wariness of medical equipment. Meanwhile, both girls shot glances at one another once Naruto finished laying out his ground rules, speaking without words. After a brief pause, they both eventually nodded and turned back to the blonde, prepared to agree to his terms. A safe haven with rules was infinitely better than no safe haven at all, as they could actually take a breather from their consistently dangerous lives on the run. Naruto took a second to check the time by checking the clock on the wall, sighing at what he saw. Alright, I'm gonna head to school now so you guys can just stay here and rest up, since neither of you are completely healed yet. I will see you guys after school. The young man was already getting up from his seat in order to leave, dreading his boring day. Yet, in an interesting twist, he was suddenly stopped by a hand to his shoulder, which just so happened to belong to the still uncomfortable Mio. Can I? Well, Mio stuttered out, her voice faint and low, eyes shifty. The redhead was obviously trying to say something to Naruto, though, for the life of him, he couldn't quite grasp what. It was all a garbled mess to him. Maria, for her part, couldn't help but smile at her friend's shy nature, before quickly deciding to stop the painful scene and help her. She wants to come with you to the schools so that she could apply there. I apologize for Mio-sama's behavior. She doesn't know how to act in front of her savior yet, I bet. Maria claimed, shooting a sly glance towards Mio's direction. Whether the charge was true or not, the redhead's face still took on a similar shade to her own vibrant red hair. Dash. That's not it. Mio shouted indignantly to the silverette, before clamping her mouth shut and glaring at the ground. Then what is it? Naruto questioned with a tilt of his head, more confused than anything else. At the blonde's query, Mio managed to stop glaring at the ground and ignore her obviously amused guardian. I wanted to go to school too. The shinobi's eyes widened slightly, surprised to hear that kind of request, of all things. Why? By this point, the redhead was beginning to squirm under his focus, but managed to keep forging ahead regardless. Before I knew about my lineage, I lived like a normal human girl. It's what I was, nothing more or less than that. So I can't help but want that sense of normalcy again, you know? As if a switch had been flipped, she kept going, gaining more steam as she went along. I just want a chance to feel safe again, with the worst thing that I have to worry about doing is getting good grades. So can I please come with you to see this school? Mio was practically begging now, so much so that she was actually kowtowing to him, hoping beyond hope that he would give her the green light. She knew that Naruto had, essentially, become their de facto guardian while they lived in his home, so it was actually quite selfish of her to make such a request. He probably felt responsible for their well-being by this point, so this appeal to his kindness could be easily seen as an abuse his inner decency in order to make herself feel normal again. All while she was placing herself out in the open again, where she could be attacked once more. It wasn't fair to either Naruto or Maria. But deep inside, she knew that desperately needed this. She somehow found the willpower to stay alive after her foster parents were killed by devils who hated her real father, but that was slowly being pushed to the brink with all of danger that followed afterwards. For the first time, in a long time, she felt she was safe enough to finally move past of what happened. Safe enough to go back to what life was like before the people she called Tsuchan and Ka-chan were murdered right in front of her. So she hoped. Which was why, when everything went silent, the tension was slowly becoming unbearable. For a moment, Mio seriously began to worry that she angered their new protector, so she had brought her head up immediately in order to apologize for such a transgression. At least, until she saw something that made her jaw unhinge. Naruto was staring at her, just staring at her with tears streaming down his face like a waterfall, and snot trailing down his nose. The redhead was seriously gawking by this point, unable to believe what she was seeing, unable to even register it. This was the mighty warrior that slaughtered the stray devils just yesterday. This was the man that frightened her just earlier this morning. She just couldn't reconcile that the warrior yesterday and this person in front of her were actually the same. This guy was weird. Not that she thought that was a bad thing. Horrible, just horrible. Of course you can come with me, Databeo. You deserve to have some happiness. To feel safe. And if this is what you need to do in order to reach that, then let's go. Naruto cried as the waterfall tears were wiped away by his sleeve, before grabbing her arm and literally dragging her towards the direction of Ko Academy. Wait. Not so hard. Hey. If you keep this up, I'll kill you 100 times over. Hey. Are you listening to me? Mio cried, getting dragged further and further away from the house from an overenthusiastic teenaged boy. Maria just watched all this happen with an amused smile. Life seemed to be making a positive turn for everyone involved. She giggled a little and trailed after them. After Mio finally curbed Naruto's enthusiasm, the small group began to walk at a more sedate pace towards the school, with Naruto explaining what Ko Academy looked like, and how it was like. So far, she liked what she heard, but was slightly bummed out that Naruto couldn't really tell her how the teachers were like, since he seemed to either skip their classes or fall asleep on them. She supposed that, considering his rather spontaneous outbursts, she should have expected that. It took a little bit, but the group finally made it to the gates of the prestigious academy, and Mio couldn't help but marvel at it. It was huge. As she had her attention focused purely on the wealthy institution itself, the blonde took note of something else entirely. A girl was standing in front of the gate, welcoming them in, and checking to make sure all of the students there were in their proper uniform. That girl was Shirtori Sona, the student council president of Ko Academy. Naruto cursed under his breath as he searched for a way to warn his new roommates to dodge the president's notice. But just like last time they met, the girl with glasses noticed him before he could try and escape. Damn it. Naruto plastered a smile on his face and greeted her. Heya, Shitori-san. What are you up to in this fine summer day? Ah, Uzumaki-san. I am pleased to see you have decided to return to school. I hope your sister is doing well? Sona questioned, ignoring his sarcastic remark, before she noticed that the teen wasn't alone. The first one that she noticed was little girl next to Naruto, who was wearing what looked like a classic gothic Lolita dress. Well, she supposed that everyone had their quirks. But his other companion made her do a double take for a moment due to the girl's stunning similarity to one of her friends. Rias? Sona asked hesitantly, before reason finally took control of her momentarily stunned brain. No. Now that she looked at the girl more closely, there were many differences between the most popular girl in school and Uzumaki Naruto's companion. This girl had pink eyes, a more rounded face, her hair was a lighter shade of red, was of far shorter length, and was physically quite shorter than her childhood friend. The confusion was quite embarrassing for the usually serious student council president. Mio was shocked by the bespectacled girl's outburst, getting a confused blink out of her. Who was Rias? But before she pondered the question further, the bespectacled girl shook her head and then spoke again. I apologize for my momentary outburst. I am Torai Sona, the student council president of Ko Academy. It is nice to meet you, the two of you. Sona introduced herself politely, before turning to Naruto and pinning him with a stare. Naruto just raised a brow in response, confused at why the Kaicho was looking at him, as if something was his fault. Uzumaki-san, while it is nice that you are showing your friends around Ko Academy, it is also not allowed. Unfortunately, you can't bring in individuals who aren't students, or aren't related to any students attending here. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to escort your friends off of the premises. Rules are rules after all, Sona stated sternly. To her, rules are guidelines meant for people to follow so that everyone could prosper to the best of their abilities. Well, actually, she is related to me, Shitori-san, Naruto claimed and slightly regretted in the same breath. He quickly decided to roll with it. Mio turned to look at the blonde with incredulity, unable to understand what the hell he was talking about. What she didn't realize was that the teen was trying to, in his own clumsy way, get her a spot in Ko Academy, especially after hearing a bit of her story. The shinobi quickly realized that only a parent or legal guardian would be able to enroll Mio into Ko, due to the rule that Sona just told him. And since Mio's guardian was Maria, who probably have not legally adopted her, so to speak, that meant that the redhead literally had no way to possibly get enrolled. At least, within the short time frame that she was probably gonna stay in Ko Town with Maria. Also, Naruto didn't want to make another fake persona like Minato with a clone using a henge again, wary of just making up a parent for her so that he could enroll her in. Make too many fake personas, and he'd fuck up sometime in the future. Thankfully, if this conversation worked like how he thought it would, then he could just use Minato again to help enroll her. Or better yet, just skip using a henge clone again. So Naruto enacted his brilliant plan in order to help her out. You see, the blonde drawled out slowly, his eyes boring into Sona's with grim seriousness. This girl here is actually someone close to me. As a matter of fact, I've mentioned her once to you before, Kaicho. The student council president straightened her spine at this claim, her mind registering his words, quickly recollecting their last conversation. You mean? With a triumphant grin, Naruto opened his mouth and made his announcement, revealing his brilliant idea. That's right. This girl right here is my sister, Mio. Everyone there fell silent following this exclamation, with the only thing interrupting it being Mio crashing into the ground, face first. What the hell? So this is your sister, Uzumaki-san? I must say that it's nice to meet her in person. Tell me, have you been feeling alright since your brother went to check up on you? Sona asked, quickly recovering from the blonde's words, and pushing her glasses back onto the bridge of her nose. It nearly fell off of her face due to her shock. Mio, by now, was just staring olishly at Sona, trying to understand what the Kaicho of Ko was talking about. There was no way she was talking about the battle that happened in the forest northwest of Ko Town, right? But what else could she possibly be talking about? The half-devil looked helplessly at Naruto, asking him without words to give her an idea of what to do. She saw his eyes widen as he tried to give her signals behind the black-haired girl as to what to do, though she had absolutely no idea what the hell he was trying to say. She decided to play it safe. Thank you for your concern, Sona-san. I'm much better now thanks to my Nai-san, Mio admitted with a flushed face, trying not to fall over due to her embarrassment. Maria gazed at Mio with interest, filing away a possibility of a fetish for teasing material for later. In her humble opinion, she felt that Mio-sama needed to be teased more. Sona nodded, finally mollified that the rules weren't being broken by the blonde and finally allowed them to pass. Naruto exhaled a sigh of relief at that. The stern girl was hard to say no to, but he suspected she was like that with most people. It was only when they moved past the gate, and then moved so far away from it that they couldn't see it anymore, that the shinobi quickly moved closer to his two companions and asked a question that he should have asked before. Hey, how come I couldn't sense your presences as devils at all? Hell, Shitori-san didn't suspect a thing about your true identities. Naruto wondered aloud, genuinely curious. He sensed their use of demonic powers in the forest, but for some reason, he was barely able to sense their presences anymore. Granted, he wasn't that good a sensor unless he was in sage mode, but still, his close proximity should have given them away. Maria just winked at Naruto. I have the ability to suppress our presences from others. It's a skill that allowed Mio-sama and I to live for as long as we have while on the run. It isn't perfect, and not too strong either, but unless someone is actively searching for us, they won't be able to tell us apart from an average human. Naruto just shook his head in amusement at her antics and began walking faster, taking the lead in order to give them a tour of Ko Academy. In the window of the Occult Research Club's main building, Rias Gremory was staring at something outside of the window, focused, intense even. Her queen moved up to her side and offered her a tea from the tray that she was holding, expectant. The king thanked her quietly, yet never took her attention away from the window, remaining focused. Akino tilted her head at Ria's strange behavior, and decided to follow her line of sight to check on what exactly had her attention. Her eyes landed on a group of three that was talking animatedly with one another, being led by a teenage boy with spiky blonde hair, slightly tanned skin, and whisker marks. Ah. Era, it seems like you have your sights set on a little fox, Bucho? Akino teased her friend with a small smile hidden behind her hand. Rias just ignored her and stared hard at the boy, though she quietly acknowledged that he, indeed, kind of looked like a fox with those whiskers. Uzumaki Naruto, right? The blonde held himself up high while he walked, not leaving himself in a slouch like most teenage boys did in their carefree lives. More than that, there was a bright glint in his eyes that spoke of a very positive attitude. Though, that was all she could gather from her highly tuned devil eyes, but now, at least, she was keenly interested. So this was who Sona noticed, huh? Rias nodded decisively, and smoothly went back to her desk in order to plan out how to best meet with him face to face. With Naruto and Issei reinforcing her peerage, she should be in a much better position to stop her nightmares from coming true. Naruto figured that Shitori-san was probably very disappointed in him. But he didn't really care about getting himself an education since he has a much better reason to say, when will I ever use this in my life? After all, he was going to get back home one day, while focusing on beating the crap out of some people and talking down some others. So he really doubted that he would ever need to know about how to draw art, learn about biology, or this world's history. But at the very least, he was able to give both of his new roommates a decent tour, which took most of the school day. So he decided to skip his classes again, and lead his new friends back home. So Mio, how do you like Ko Academy? Naruto asked his new sister. Mio beamed at him, and began to animatedly talk about how great the high school was, and how she would love to enroll into the school. The sheer concept of going to school again, and making new friends really seemed to have brought the redhead out of her shell a bit. Naruto just smiled at her exuberance, internally deciding that he would do his best to make sure that she could smile like that. As long as she was under his case, he would do his best. The shinobi frowned then, twitching as he. Hey girls, I need to go pick up some groceries for the house. I didn't really think that I would have too many people coming over, you see? So can I trust you two to find your way home by yourselves? Naruto asked with a friendly smile, almost as a challenge. Maria beamed at the sign of trust that the blonde offered them, and quickly agreed, dragging Mio with her, as she moved to charge ahead. Though Mio physically stopped the succubus by dragging her heels on the ground, staring at Naruto for a moment, to his confusion. What's up, Mio? You okay? Naruto questioned in slight concern. She didn't answer at first, instead choosing to continue to stare at him, before she finally did something by asking a question of her own. I should be asking you that, are you okay, Naruto? Mio asked, her growing frown marring her features. The blonde just waved her off with a chuckle. What, don't trust me with getting the groceries right? Well, I think that you should have more faith in my abilities, Imuto. His remark caused Mio to burn up in embarrassment again, before she gave a huff and stormed back towards the house. Too upset to continue the conversation. Heh. She was too fun to tease sometimes, even Naruto of all people couldn't resist. Keeping his smile on his face, Naruto began walking towards the nearby grocery store, his features slowly losing its positive attitude as he took in the features of someone he didn't want to see again so soon. He eventually stopped in the middle of a busy sidewalk, right in front of a girl with hard eyes. Nanaka Yuki. Neither said a word for a moment, both just staring at one another for a couple of seconds. Other pedestrians could be forgiven if they seemed like a shy new couple trying to kiss one another with their close proximity. But there was no friendly gestures to be found in each other's eyes. You lied, Uzumaki Naruto. Yuki eventually spoke up, her accusation stated like a fact. Naruto felt his hackles start to rise at the charge. I didn't lie to you at all, Nanaka-san. I never go back on my words, you can bet on that. Naruto retorted, his blue irises growing cooler. Oh? Since when was Lucifer's daughter someone you considered precious, Uzumaki Naruto? Yuki hissed with her eyes narrowing in anger. Ah. So that's what this was about. That is a different matter entirely. She is a girl that needed help and I simply decided to help her in that time of need. Do I need to explain all of my actions to you now, Nanaka-san? Naruto asked, slowly becoming more incensed by her words and his naturally hot-tempered temperament wasn't helping. Nanaka Yuki stared at him for a moment before taking a step back. Naruto widened his eyes for a moment, unsure of what was going on, or how he should take it. Was she backing off? Fight me, Uzumaki-san, Yuki demanded with a dark glint in her eye. The shinobi jerked slightly at the demand, needing a second to appreciate what the hell just happened. In her eyes, no matter how you looked at the current situation as it was, they were enemies. Even if Uzumaki was just being a nice person for whatever reason, it still didn't change the fact that this boy was aiding an enemy of her faction. That was all there was to it. I thought you cared about innocent humans? You would fight me here? Naruto wondered aloud with a grim face, sparing a look around him. If she attacked him here, then he would have no choice but to aim to kill, despite any possible problems down the road with this hero tribe. Too many lives would be at stake if he didn't, and his anonymity wasn't worth the lives of so many people. Yuki widened her eyes in surprise at his words. Did he actually care about the innocent humans around them? She thought that he would attack her here regardless, since he was helping the Devil Princess, so she assumed that she would have no other choice. Maybe Uzumaki-san wasn't the trash that she assumed he was. You're right, let's take this to where you battled those stray devils and helped Naru's Mio. There will be no distractions there. Yuki conceded easily enough. Both future combatants stared at one another, and then disappeared in speeds that no ordinary human eye could follow. They both arrived at the forest in a few moments, using the relatively empty streets to reach their destination without hassle. Both of them took their positions away from one another, preparing themselves for a fight. Is there no way we could end this peacefully, Nanaka-san? Naruto asked, genuinely not wanting to fight the girl who seemed to have such a strong moral compass. It was the simple fact that they were on opposite sides that made this hard to negotiate over. Loyalty to a group above all else. Sorry, Uzumaki-san, but like I said before, we are enemies now, there is no more diplomacy. Don't worry, I will do my best to make your end painless. Nanaka solemnly stated before allowing the green aura from before to overtake her fully. Naruto narrowed his eyes, so she was taking this seriously, huh? Before him stood Nanaka Yuki in her combat attire. She wore a form-fitting navy blue leotard with a white skirt. She had metal gauntlets on her arms and legs, as well as a blue cape that adorned her shoulders. On her hand was the blade that she had before in all of its glory, pointing at Naruto again, just like last time. Except this time. Uzumaki Naruto, this time you will face Sakuya's full power. Prepare yourself, Yuki shouted as she lowered her body to pounce her enemy. Naruto had his blonde locks cover his eyes, and then looked up to meet determined yellow with hard blue. Bring it. Nanaka Yuki was a well-trained hero. That was a belief that many in the hero tribe held in good authority, at least in terms of her generation. But not only was she considered a well-trained hero, but she was also a well-motivated hero, something that many in the hero tribe felt was, perhaps, more admirable. That being said, there were some who worried that she was just a tad too zealous in her attitude. a sentiment that the female teenager didn't even entertain as being remotely true whatsoever. To her, the hero tribe was a vital organization that was meant to prevent the supernatural from thoroughly abusing their human counterparts, and protecting it was absolutely paramount above all else. From any threat, from without or within. Her fervent need to defend her faction, as well as her drive to push herself beyond her limits, was based on a simple goal per se, one that very much became the cornerstone of her beliefs. The need to become a true hero. She wanted to reach that stage where, no matter who she fought, she would emerge victorious against whatever antagonists stood against her. Like in the legends of old, where great heroes would smash and break through every obstacle that stood before them, no matter who or what they were. In the past, she wanted to reach that goal so desperately that she would consistently train herself until she could no longer move and her instructors were forced to order her to stop, lest she hurt herself. Practically none of the other aspiring hero children would understood why Yuki would go through such lengths to become a true hero, very much as confused as the adults were. To them, they would become heroes as soon as they received their weapons and capes. To them, that was their end goal. So it befuddled them, why would this girl want to go even further? To them, the girl was an oddity. They couldn't understand, none of them could. The origin of her ambition, which had brought her into conflict with a certain blonde teenager, stemmed from a certain incident that has left a scar on the hero tribe to the present day. Unfortunately, this incident has left an even bigger scar on a select few from the upcoming generation, changing their outlooks and beliefs irrevocably. This incident revolved around former heroes that were looked up to as role models by many around her, though she only knew of one personally. They were the heroes that would change the world for the betterment of humanity, and one in particular was widely thought as the future leader of their faction, such was his skill and talent. That prodigy was everything that she wanted to aspire to back then, a beacon to aim for with the rest of the hero children. Those that came before couldn't understand the sting of betrayal that ran deep, and those that came after wouldn't understand that pain of loss. She was Nanaka Yuki, and she was a hero that would never let an incident like that happen ever again. From within or without. Not from him. And not from the blonde boy that had the gall to act innocent in front of her. The hero made the first move by raising her sword, Sakuya, up high, before slashing downwards in her enemy's direction, seemingly for no reason. At least at first it seemed so, as the maneuver was made while she was nowhere near Naruto for her steel to make contact, but the green wave that coalesced from that movement spoke differently. Moving out from the razor edge of her katana, a green sickle-like wave sped towards him, made up of some unknown energy. It was new to him. But it wasn't a problem for him anyway, so no worries. Naruto easily sidestepped the wave, the energy close enough for him to feel its heat as it passed, before moving to walk towards his opponent with hardened eyes. Yuki narrowed her own eyes at the blonde, clenching the hilt of her blade a bit tighter. He was not taking this seriously. She would make him regret that decision shortly. Twisting her arm, the hero viciously swung her sword, making several more slashes while charging at him to engage him in close-quarters combat, aware that that's where they both excelled in. But she also knew that she had an advantage due to her knowledge about his abilities, compared to his lack of knowledge. Since he wasn't taking this seriously, she would use this chance to remove what she believed was his one true advantage, that speed of his, by keeping him in close quarters. Little did she know that Naruto was more interested in watching how she fought compared to actually fighting, as he figured by this point that conflict with the hero tribe was a likely possibility by this point. One of their members was attacking him right now after all. So, in case Naruto had to face an even tougher opponent than Nanaka, it would be nice to see how these heroes fought. So far he wasn't really impressed. Yeah, she had a strong sword, no doubt about it, but that was pretty much all she had so far. Then again, he also knew that she was still holding back a little for whatever reason. The real fight would begin soon. Naruto ended his musings by twisting his body around to dodge the incoming green waves that would have hit him if he hadn't moved, immediately bringing a kunai out from under his right cuff to defend himself as he moved. Enhancing it with wind chakra so that he could block the slash that was aimed at his hips from Nanaka Yuki's Sakuya, catching it before it made contact. The blue net immediately ducked when Naruto brought another kunai from his left cuff to stab her torso, only barely managing to respond in time, and kicked out her foot to knock out his legs from under him. In turn, the blonde jumped up from her attempt to trip him up and soared over her head, stopping himself short as he threw his hand out and grabbed the crown of her head with his limb. Like that, he was literally handstanding on top of the hero's head. Before she could even register what he had done, the young man quickly pushed himself off of her head, flipping over her, and kicked the back of her head as he moved away, knocking her onto the hard ground all the while. Crashing down and sent sliding, the teenaged female forced her fingers into the ground to slow down her fast movement, successfully doing so after a few parseconds. Quickly getting up and turning to where she last saw her erstwhile enemy, getting back into a defensive position and looking at him with wary eyes. This wasn't going as well as she'd hoped. He was moving faster than she expected. Or rather, he was moving at comparable speeds to his fight with those stray devils, but whenever he had to dodge her attacks, his speed would increase a bit in those exact moments. Just enough to make sure he ended up unharmed from her attacks, as a matter of fact. In those exact instances, he would become a blur to her. Such an increase shouldn't be possible unless he was holding back? No, that was illogical. She saw how strong and fast he was when he fought those stray devils before, all while aiming to save the devil princess and her succubus. He would have no reason to hold back then, since he was fighting to save them. The only reason he would hold back in such an instance would be if he noticed her spying on them during the battle, but that couldn't be the case since he was surprised by her knowledge about his intervention. So how was he moving faster? Was she, perhaps, overthinking this? Was he doing this on purpose in order to confuse and distract her? As Yuki continued to hesitate due to her own doubts, Naruto raised an eyebrow at her new cautious approach. Hey, what's wrong, Nanaka-san? I thought you were gonna beat me? How are you gonna do that by standing all the way over there? The hero peered up at her enemy, narrowing her eyes at him as he continued to speak. You know the shinobi input, confidence in every facet of his manner and tone. We can stop this whenever you want, especially since you can't beat me. As expected, his opponent bristled at his goading, much to the blonde's amusement. Because, to be blunt, he had ample reason to be sure of his chances against her. He had yet to use anything except pure taijutsu so far, and if this kept up, then he wouldn't have to use anything more either. Which was a good thing, as the less he showed her of his abilities, the less she could report back to her faction. Especially since he really didn't want to kill her and become a full-blown enemy of this hero tribe. He honestly held out hope that there could be a way for him to stop this incident from making him a target of this group that she was a part of, but that wouldn't happen if he killed one of their own. So he waited, prepared for her next move. Yuki grit her teeth at his confidence, trying not to let Uzumaki's words get to her as she considered her options. Obviously, she needed to get one clean hit on him at the very least. If she could, then his little speed boost should be negatively affected at the very least, as well as his overall ability to dodge her attacks. She could beat him, she just needed to let go of her restraints. So, taking a deep breath as she closed her eyes, the young woman began to center herself, tapping into something within. Naruto, who figured that she was just calming herself for their next clash, raised a single brow as her body began to glow with a yellow aura, enveloping the young hero completely. That aura pulsed as it surrounded her body and quickly dispersed after a sparse few moments, with Yuki standing at the same spot as before, completely unchanged. It was only when she opened her eyes again that he noticed the change. A change that temporarily brought back memories of red eyes and spinning tomos. Thankfully, for the sake of his sanity, her eye color didn't change, but her eyes had gained a new appearance thanks to what looked like a pair of crosshairs that were placed over her pupils, with a circle conjoining in the middle. Naruto couldn't help but feel that the fight was about to change. Eye powers tended to do that. For a half second, the brunette didn't make any move whatsoever, content with holding his eye, before she finally spoke again. Congratulations, Uzumaki Naruto. Nanaka Yuki started, genuinely impressed by her enemy's speed. You have forced me to rely upon my trump card, as your abilities obviously outclass my own by this point. Clutching her katana's handle tightly, she continued, the edge of her lips twisting upwards a bit. My hidden power, very few have faced me with my true sight in battle, and only 2 have actually managed to defeat me with it activated. I hope, for your sake, that you've prepared yourself for a hard fight. Naruto blinked, not responding one way or another, having faced way too many eye powers back in the elemental nations to truly be intimidated. Honestly, he should be a little wary, but all he really felt was a sense of exasperation at this new eye power. So, splitting the difference, he decided to simply end this all in one shot by moving at speeds she couldn't follow, not letting her eye powers give her a chance to turn this battle around. With that in mind, Naruto charged in with clear supersonic speeds and aimed a fist at the hero's stomach, keeping her crosshairs in sight, making sure that she didn't try anything funny with those eyes. Strangely enough, as he kept eye contact, her focus remained on him, reacting to him, aware of his movements. Something that shouldn't have been possible at his current speeds. Yet, to his shock, before his fist could connect with his opponent's stomach, she managed to tilt her body away from the blow, leaving the blonde to swing at nothing except air. Reacting quickly, he pulled his fist back and launched his leg to the side of her head, keen to end this in a flash. She wasn't giving him that chance, however, as she just as quickly ducked under his attack, dodging it just like the last one. Except now she brought her blade out to occupy the space that her head used to be in, allowing the blonde's leg to slam into the business end of her weapon. But Naruto wasn't having any of that, opting to aim his foot at the very side of the blade, aiming to kick it at its flat side in order to knock it out of Nanaka's hands. A move which Nanaka herself moved to make sure to use to her advantage, turning her blade just enough to make sure his foot slammed onto its sharpened edge, aiming to incapacitate. And for a moment, it looked like it really would incapacitate him, as the foot continued to approach. Until, at the last moment, when the errant limb halted right before it made contact with the knife edge. A standstill immediately followed, with either opponents moving for a breath of an instant. That changed quickly, with the hero deciding to go all in and swing Sakuya around to cut into her enemy's limb. Naruto, grinning, totally expected that. Using his other foot, which was firmly placed on the ground, he pushed himself backwards as he retracted his other foot, allowing Nanaka Yuki to overextend herself as she swung at the spot where his extended limb used to be. Allowing himself to fall backwards at the sudden movement, the shinobi got into a handstand on the ground before he could hit the ground and aimed both of his legs at the flat side of the girl's blade, and knocking it harshly away from its original trajectory. Stumbling from the sudden move that nearly ripped her weapon away from her grasp, the hero found herself unable to continue her assault, leaving Naruto the chance to back up and backflip back up to his feet. Blue eyes peered back to the stumbling female, narrowed in suspicion. How could he not? Nanaka Yuki was not this fast before, yet not only was she fast enough to respond to his moves, her moves suddenly became much more crisp and calculated after she got those eyes. It was obviously because of her changed eyes, but what exactly did they do? Impressive, Uzumaki-san. Yuki spoke up, getting up from her down position to face the blonde again. You were much more faster than I gave you credit for, but as you see, I have the speed to keep up now, and it's only a matter of time until you make a mistake. Listening to the teenage girl's boasting, Naruto had to quietly admit that whatever she did was effective, but he also knew from experience that no power was perfect. Her so-called true sight had a weakness, he just had to find it. And he would. Without warning, the shinobi charged at Yuki once more while throwing his kunai at her as a distraction, intent on closing the gap between them. She dodged it as he expected, but seeing her widen her eyes at his tactic, as well as noting how she only narrowly dodged the little knife as it clipped some of her hair, threw him off. What happened to all her speed just now? Naruto cursed the fact that he couldn't publicly carry kunai and shuriken. He could have really used some right about then. Unfortunately, while he still had one more on him, he didn't want to throw his other kunai at his enemy, as he still needed it to help him curb his opponent's blade advantage. So he had to deal with it for now, annoyingly. Regardless, Naruto was already on top of Yuki by the time she had turned her attention back to him, using his distraction to full effect. Caught his eyes with her own, the hero quickly slid her body to the right to dodge the blonde's downward kick, retaliating with a vicious slash by her katana, which just so happened to release a wave of green energy at its very edge. Forced to back up, lest he get cut, the shinobi attempted to raise his slammed foot from the ground as it impacted the spot where Nanaka Yuki once stood, trying to back up from the attack, aware that he had to move quickly before his opponent managed to take advantage of his bad position. Through the cloud of dust that the blonde picked up, Yuki moved to do just as Naruto predicted and slashed her sword towards Naruto's right side, aiming for clear bisection. But to her surprise, the other human raised both of his hands out while tucking his kunai in between two of his fingers, then slammed both limbs onto the speeding flat edges of the deadly katana, halting its movement. Uzumaki Naruto had just caught the blade between his hands. Nanaka Yuki, with her eyes wide, just stared at the phenomenon with slight disbelief, never seeing such speed before in her life with a single exception. Naruto just grinned at this, amused if anything, before he viciously lashed out with his left foot towards the girl's stomach, taking advantage of her stilled body. Yellow eyes sharpened as the left foot was efficiently dodged when she twisted her body to the right, narrowly moving out of the foot's way. Then, in a move which the hero took as a small triumph, she moved her right hand from the blade's hilt in order to use it to catch the offending limb into a hold, tucking it under her armpit, and keeping it there. Naruto, ever positive, kept his grin despite what has happened. And why did that unnerve Nanaka Yuki more than any angry raving ever could? From out of nowhere, the shinobi hopped up on his remaining leg, using her hold on his left leg to keep him suspended in the air as he kept his own hold on her blade secure. In that position, he lashed out with his other limb towards the brunette's face, aiming for a clean and powerful connection. Barely keeping up, the hero was forced to bend her back in a perfect parallel to the ground to dodge the foot, silently thankful that she was so flexible as to move out of the way of such an attack in such close quarters. But she soon realized that the foot that she essentially ducked under was still hanging over her head, like a guillotine. Nanaka Yuki couldn't help but open her mouth to curse before the foot descended on her. Like a falling axe, she was smashed in the face and dug into the ground without mercy. Feeling his heel make contact, Naruto quickly disengaged and backed up to assess the damage he has done, unable to stop the growing smirk that was splitting his face. Silence prevailed over the area for a split moment, only being interrupted once the teenaged female slowly began to push herself away from her hole, raising her head to look at the shinobi. Her glower at his direction, as well as the nasty bloody nose that she's got, let him know that she was quite in a lot of pain. But more importantly, he found it. Throughout this fight, his opponent has managed to hold her own against him despite her poor performance against him earlier, somehow managing to keep you, after she got those eyes of hers. Well, he was pretty damn sure that he found her eye power's weakness. That being said, it would be way too annoying to exploit it the conventional way, so he decided to do this the old-fashioned way. By this point, the hero steadily got up from her place on the ground, her nose covered by one of her metal gauntlets, as she glared at the blonde's insufferably cheerful smirk as he waited for her to get up again. Was he really that confident that he would win? She would disavow him from that notion soon enough, especially with her next move. Naruto charged forward again, intent on ending this once and for all as their eyes met once more, determination burning in both pairs of irises. A wind-coated kunai clashed with a magic sword as both combatants met with their faces mere inches apart. Just by taking a cursory glance at their clash though, one could easily see that it was by no means an equal fight, as Naruto was definitely pushing back the female with his greater strength. This became more obvious when the blonde made to knock Sakuya from Yuki's hands, hooking his smaller weapon and attempting to yank it from her fingertips, managing to pull it away from the both of them and leave her wide open for his weapon. Naruto hesitated for a split second, before making to stab his kunai towards Yuki's stomach, intent on incapacitating her. That split moment's hesitation allowed for the girl to back away safely from his stab, making sure that she got away unscathed, but still weaponless. The shinobi clicked his tongue at that, annoyed at how careful he was being in not doing any permanent damage to her, as doing so could definitely keep him in her faction's shit list. Still, at least he was able to disarm her. His optimism vanished about the same time as the hero's sword did, vanishing in a flash of green and reappearing right in the palm of her hand. That was totally not fair. Nanaka Yuki, by this point, was now visibly tired, breathing in short and shallow breaths to feed her lungs as she raised her blade again to meet with this unknown being in open combat. Her sacred Girid allowed her to raise her own speed to give her the chance to keep up with her opponent, not match them, an ability that absorbed an exorbitant amount of stamina to utilize properly for extended periods of time. She needed to end this now. The hero raised her sword high up above her head, gripping its hilt tightly as it began to light up with a green aura and swung. But unlike all the other times before, the green wave that she had just materialized stayed in place, as if frozen by time. She twisted her arms and swung her katana twice more, intersecting the first one using different angles, and those waves stayed in place as well. With her brows scrunched together, focused, the young woman swung Sakuya 5 more times, creating waves of power that remained still in front of her. Staring at the waves of power, Naruto suddenly realized that he was in real danger this time, as in front of him were several of those green waves weaved together like a spider web, reminding him of Hinata's special jutsu. Nanaka Yuki then pointed her sword at Naruto, and uttered one word. Fire. As if the green waves were given life by the singular command, the series of sword slashes moved forward and soared towards the shinobi at frightening speeds, each wave propelling the other to faster speeds as they remained intersected. Naruto paused for a heartbeat, before quickly moving towards the onslaught with a determined glint in his eye, believing that he wouldn't be able to dodge the incoming attack by running around or jumping over it since its speed was quickly rising to higher levels. All that was left was one option: going through it. Naruto ducked, dodged, weaved, jumped, shifted, and ran through the attack like the world's most dangerous obstacle course, feeling some of the waves narrowly clip a bit of his clothes and hair as he made it through. As expected, the blonde managed to dodge the last wave and stepped foot on the solid ground as soon as he was safe again, with nary a wound on his body, despite the cuts all across his clothing. But when he turned to find his opponent again, he found her eyes to be far closer than he would have liked. "Got you." That was all Naruto heard as a sharp blade ripped right into his skin, ramming all the way through his body as it exited out through his back. Blue eyes widened in shock as blood leaked from his mouth, staring at the sword that had impaled itself through him, blinking rapidly as he only just begun to register what had just happened. Yellow eyes looked at him with a solemn air that the hero didn't really expect to be feeling, somehow uncomfortable with watching the young man's life pass before her eyes. He said it himself, maybe it didn't have to end this way. "It's over," Yuki claimed quietly, waiting for the blonde to lose his life, somewhat listless in her demeanor as she watched. She honestly wasn't sure if this was a good thing or not, but it needed to be done, of that she had no doubt. Then, in a sudden jerking motion, the hero snapped her eyes in shock as she heard something that she shouldn't have heard from the blonde. He was chuckling. Nanaka Yuki gaped at him openly as Naruto finally stopped chuckling, unable to believe that he was able to do such a thing in a time like this. Still, the shinobi tilted his head up, with blood still dripping from his lips, meeting her eyes with his own. "BZZT," Naruto said with a bloody grin. "BZZT?" Yuki couldn't help but repeat, such was her confusion. Then suddenly the blonde man popped, as if he was a party balloon full of smoke that was just popped. Yuki had absolutely no idea what had just happened, as she was terribly confused. Then she heard the voice of the source of her confusion, which didn't sound anywhere near death's door. "Wrong." Her eyes widened as she tried to quickly turn around to. Too late. A fist smashed against her stomach and embedded itself in her. A distant part of her mind that wasn't reeling from the pain couldn't help but compare the feeling to the force of something like a freight train. It was really that bad. She was sent flying and crashing through several trees like a live wrecking ball, before making a human-sized crater into the forest floor, with dirt and dust being sent high up into the air. Yuki just stared up into the sky, thoroughly tired and disoriented after suffering what felt like back-breaking injuries, unwilling to move lest she genuinely shatter what was left of her spine. Also, she couldn't help but think that speed types never punched so hard. That meant that he wasn't just a speed type, yet another thing that she learned about Uzumaki Naruto that she should have before this fight. She continued to stare at the sky listlessly until she saw a flash of blonde hair, aware of who it was. Uzumaki Naruto walked out from the bushes to reach her fallen form with a small grin. She couldn't help but notice that he had no stab wound. "How?" Yuki asked with difficulty. Everything hurt, just moving her lips felt like hell at the moment. Naruto just nervously scratched the back of his head. "An old technique of mine, it's called Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and it allows me to create copies of myself," he answered easily. To him, honestly speaking, it was fine that he told her about this, since she just saw it in action anyway. That being said, he wasn't gonna tell her the fact that he could make a lot of them, or that they share intel when popped. He had to keep some things to himself. "When?" Yuki asked, now staring up into the night stars. "When had night fallen?" "When I smashed you into the ground, I replaced myself with a clone and let him fight you. It was the only way to get around your sacred gear's powers without the battle taking too long," Naruto explained easily, even though he wasn't exactly being factual. He had other options, it's just that those would probably have killed her. "I see, well, it seems that you are the winner, Uzumaki-san. Kill me if you wish," Yuki murmured, resigned to her fate as she closed her eyes. No matter how kind of a man he was, Uzumaki was still her enemy, just as she was his. This was how the world worked. She couldn't begrudge that of him, she would have done the same in his shoes. Everything was silent for a moment as Nanaka Yuki waited for the inevitable blow, faintly feeling herself unwound from the worries that plagued her about her faction. It was almost peaceful. That silence was broken by her enemy's voice. "Why do we have to be enemies?" Naruto asked, a genuine tone to his voice that supported his earnest expression. He honestly didn't want to kill her, seeing no point in it, especially when this entire fight was based on nothing more than a misunderstanding. If anything, if she just chilled with the me versus them mentality, maybe they could even be friends. Yuki opened her eyes and stared at Naruto, a faint bit of incredulity coloring her orbs as she answered him. It is impossible. I am a hero and you are an ally of devils. There is no middle ground. Naruto shook his head and leaned down towards her, unable to agree with that line of thinking. Isn't it a hero's duty to do the impossible for the betterment of those they protect? Naruto asked with a frown. He didn't know much about the history of this world, but he was sure that the word hero wasn't different from his world's version. No, the duty of a hero is to protect humans from the supernatural, Yuki replied quietly, having no idea where was he going with this. Naruto regarded her for a moment before turning away to look to the stars. If that is what the definition of a hero is in this world, then I feel sorry for it, the blonde claimed listlessly, before turning back to the now openly glaring Yuki. A hero is a person who does their best to protect the weak against the strong, someone who stands for justice, someone who stands for peace. Naruto began, his voice getting more passionate, heated even. A hero is supposed to be a symbol, something to aspire to that others wish to follow, and a beacon in the times where others would fall into despair and give up. Yuki's own eyes flared at his words. You don't think that's what we do? We protect humans from the abuses of the powerful supernatural factions, standing as defenders and champions of the group that can't protect themselves of humanity. We are heroes. Yuki ground out, her own voice tightly wound up due to the high emotional tension. Naruto just looked at her with hard blue eyes before shooting her down, refusing to let the matter go so easily. Then why are you hunting down Naruto like a criminal? What has she done to you? To anyone? What gives you the right to dictate whether she lives or dies because of something she can't control? Naruto shouted, knowing that feeling all too well. She may have not done anything now, but in the future, Yuki tried to say, shaking her head warily before getting cut off. How the hell do you know that? Mio was just a normal teenage girl just a year ago. What kind of heroes kill people because of what they might become? Naruto growled, baring teeth as his temper grew more fiery. The shinobi quickly turned around for a precious moment after his tirade, taking a deep breath to calm himself before turning back around to the tired hero. What do you want from me, Uzumaki Naruto? Yuki questioned with a sigh, emotionally and physically tired from the day's events. I want you to act like how a true hero should, Naruto said simply. Unknowingly to the young man, he struck a chord with the girl, making her tense faintly as the words was bandied about in her head. A true hero. Nanaka Yuki closed her eyes, trying to forget what the words meant to her, staying quiet to gather her thoughts again, centering herself. In your opinion, Yuki spoke up softly, her yellow gaze opening up to see the night sky again. What would a true hero do in this situation? The shinobi just smiled and gave her his hand before replying. In my opinion, a true hero would wait and see if the bad guy was really a bad guy. Placing his other hand on his chest, Naruto flashed his teeth in a shit-eating grin, blue eyes bright in the dim light that the moon provided. I never lied when I told you that I never go back on my word, and I'm not lying now when I say that I would never harm an innocent human as long as I live. You can bet on that, Databeo. Yuki just looked at the blonde, before tilting her head enough to focus her attention on the extended hand as if it was a bomb that was about to go off. Of all the things that the hero thought could happen today when she woke up, she didn't expect this. Just looking at the inviting gesture from her former enemy, she could easily admit that she was tempted. Everything about him seemed genuine, his words were earnest and spontaneous, a far cry from the pre-planned speeches that were made to evoke something out of a person. This was just spoken from the heart. She could see that from his eyes, which seemed blindingly vivid to her at the moment. Without even thinking about it, she stretched out her hand to meet his own, drawn to him. Now, Yuki-chan, did you really think that I stood for stupid shit like peace and justice? You shouldn't trust so easily next time, Yuki-chan. It'll do you well to remember this feeling the next time that you feel like being soft. As a matter of fact, use it in order to propel yourself forward and become a wonderful human, a real hero. As if she just touched something foul, she immediately retracted her hand after dark memories resurfaced. Memories of broken promises. How, she rasped, clutching her retracting hand tightly, shielding it. How do I know that you won't betray my trust? The shinobi's features pinched up, opening his mouth to reassure her that she had both worry about. He didn't get the chance. Your words feel genuine, but I've been fooled by the charismatic words of bad men before, she claimed solemnly, on guard. So how do I know that your words actually mean anything? Even as she was speaking, Yuki's features were becoming more wary and leery. How do I know that you won't betray my trust? Naruto was speechless, completely thrown off by the hero's complete shift in behavior, not sure what to make of it. That being said, the blonde recovered admirably. Wait, just hold on a minute, where did this come from? You were ready to give me a chance here, what changed? Naruto asked in confusion, seeking understanding. Unable to bear looking at his eyes for some reason, the human teen turned her head away from the oceanic gaze of the blonde and looked at the sky instead. You wouldn't understand. Naruto frowned at this. Hey, for all you know, I may understand more than you think. I myself had a pretty rough life in the beginning, you know? Parting with this tidbit WSS meant to help the young woman to relate to him, at least, that WSS the idea. Instead of serving to reassure her, however, this only managed to worsen her already darkening mood. What do you know? How can someone who has such a bright smile ever understand how painful it is? How painful it is to know that someone you trusted with your life could so casually just throw it away. You don't understand a thing. Yuki hissed with venom, her pent-up frustration and anger leaking through as she glared at the blonde for reawakening old memories. She then turned her head to focus on anything else except her enemy's eyes, not willing to let him see the tears that were building up around her eyes born out of impotent frustration. She felt spent. Tired. Numb. She definitely wasn't expecting this to happen today. The downed hero stayed like that to numerous beats, feeling herself tense when she didn't get any response from the young man that hung over her. Did she, perhaps, push him far enough to convince him to end this permanently? She had no idea, so she had to turn back to look him in the eye and see herself what fate awaited her. So she did, slowly, taking in his features, preparing for the worst. Except, yet again, she would not be able to predict this boy's actions, which explained why her eyes widened at what she saw. He was simply sitting there, right next to her, contemplating the ground as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. But that wasn't what shocked Nanaka Yuki. It was the mournful look that overtook his usually positive disposition that stopped her short, as well as the glassy eyes that accompanied them. The far-off look in his eye also helped the hero to recognize that the blonde was remembering something that brought pain to the young man. What she didn't know was that he was remembering his sibling in every sense of the word except blood. The sibling that he had gained through friendship and lost to hate. The sibling with that damned fan symbol on their back. Those glassy eyes finally regarded her with a quiet, almost wistful smile. I do know. That was all that needed to be said. She took the hand. Nanaka Yuki couldn't help but wince at every step as Uzumaki carefully helped her walk out of the forested area that they fought in, taking extra care not to exacerbate her battered bones. She hated to admit it, but he really did a number on her. Still, the outcome of this fight ended up being far more positive than she initially imagined, even if she was pretty battered. No one died, and despite her fierce belief in keeping the hero tribe safe from all potential threats, she still preferred to preserve life rather than take it. Yes, this ended much better than she could have reasonably expected. The hero, whose head was high above the clouds, quickly ended her musings when a large red circle with intricate symbols appeared near their location. Practically right in front of them, as a matter of fact. Both humans stopping to stare at the glowing symbol that appeared out of nowhere, but both had varying reactions to it. Naruto stopped out of genuine confusion and curiosity, whereas Yuki stopped out of shock at the absolutely terrible timing that she had in coming here. Yuki just sighed at her misfortune. There went her cover in Ko Academy. Out of the magical circle that illuminated the dark forest with crimson light, was none other than Rias and her peerage, emerging from it with the assurance and confidence befitting those that were at ease in their territory. Rias, for her part, gathered her peerage in order to respond to the bursts of energy signals that were coming from the forest in the northwest of Ko Town, unsure of who or what was causing the disturbance. According to Akino, who was the one who sensed the disturbance in the first place thanks to her superior sensing abilities, the power that popped in her radar was unfamiliar to her. Yet not completely foreign. To be perfectly honest, the Gremry heiress expected to see a being from a supernatural faction that they have not yet met before, or a cocky stray devil from that was once a being that they were not yet familiar with that had to be put down. Either or seemed plausible. Which was why she was going to have Kaneko use her advanced and sensitive eyes, nose, and ears to find out more before they engaged with this possibly hostile intruder. At least, that's what she was planning on doing until she noticed that they were being stared at as soon as they entered the forest. To be blunt, she did not expect to see was the boy that Sona and herself were interested in, Uzumaki Naruto, who was holding a battered girl that wore the Ko Academy uniform. She could do nothing except stare at the rather bizarre situation before realizing that two humans have just witnessed a transportation magic circle, something that was not supposed to happen. But before she could even try to salvage the situation, she noticed all of the damage that had been done to the forest around her. There was definitely a fight that occurred around here, but where were the combatants? Her eyes fell back to the girl that Uzumaki Naruto was carrying and looked at her wounds, then it clicked. So you two were the ones responsible for the signals that we sensed, huh? Rias questioned with a small sigh, having hoped to meet with the blonde in better circumstances. But now she had no choice but to reveal her true identity. Though she had to wonder whether he was already aware of it, as he did not seem to gape like a fish when a group of teens emerged from the ground like some sort of horror flick. He did seem curious, though. Naruto, on the other hand, was initially confused with who these people were, until he felt their energies that felt just like Shirtorai Sona and his two freeloaders back home. Devils. Great, that was just great. And in accordance with his luck, he guessed that the beautiful crimson-haired girl was someone important to boot, besides probably being the leader of the group. Greetings, to the two of you. It seems that we found ourselves in a unique position, haven't we, Uzumaki Naruto-san? The red-headed girl began rhetorically, an enigmatic smile touching at her lips. Naruto narrowed his eyes at that. He has never introduced himself to her yet, so how did she know his name? Undeterred by his rising wariness, the young devil continued. I think that considering the circumstances, that it would be best for us if we talked about our rather unique situation. You must have some questions that need answering, I'm sure. Rias smoothly continued, doing her utmost to seem inviting, lest she push the blonde away from her. Though she wasn't sure what had happened in the forest, she was far more focused on the young man in front of her for the time being, seeing a golden opportunity. Remembering his curious gaze on them when her peerage first arrived, she was willing to bet that Naruto didn't know much about the supernatural, so speaking with him about this would be a great way to, at the very least, make him see that she wasn't an enemy. And, as she figured, she saw the young man's interest get piqued, if only faintly. Yuki coolly regarded the Gremry devil and then glanced back at Naruto before speaking. Perhaps it is best if we speak in private as well, Gremry-san. The wealthy high-class devil blinked, shifting her attention to the young woman by Uzumaki Naruto's side. She genuinely forgot that she was there. I apologize if I seem rude, but who are you exactly? You seem somewhat familiar, and you are wearing the Ko Academy uniform, but I don't recall. Rias frowned, tilting her head to the side. It seems that she's a student in our school, but we haven't really met in any official capacity, Bucho. Akino supplied helpfully, side by side to her king. It was obvious that she was very much acquainted with the supernatural, as the teenage girl with light blue hair wasn't the least bit surprised to see her peerage emerge from the ground. As a matter of fact, she almost seemed displeased. So the question was, which faction did she belong to? The hero continued to stare at her blankly for a moment, but internally, her gears were on overdrive over an important question. Should she tell her? The young devil was probably already suspicious when she saw Yuki and Naruto in the middle of a devastated area, probably already guessing that it was due to a battle. So there was no doubt that Gremry thought that she was from a supernatural faction, given her condition. It was possible that she could lie and pretend that she was affiliated from another religion entirely, one that had no quarrel with the devils. Yes, that would be the smart move. Then she glanced at the blonde that was helping her up through the side of her eye. The only problem with this plan was the simple fact that her conversation with Naruto was clashing with her inner pragmatism, making such an approach seem almost distasteful. A true hero would wait and see if the bad guy was actually a bad guy. She remembered watching over the activities of the Devils of Ko Academy, so sure that they would eventually drop their masks and reveal themselves to be monsters that would prey on the weaknesses of humans. After hearing the stories of the past atrocities of their kind, she was so sure. Yet, to this day, they never did anything approaching the word monstrous. To the contrary, as a matter of fact, outside of their dealings with the supernatural, they tended to act just like ordinary humans would. Even the usually reprehensible evil peace system wasn't used against the recent human-turned devil, Genshiro Saji's will. He did it entirely by his own consent, a far cry so far from what she had heard of the devils of old. Did she, perhaps, allow her distrustful nature to control her actions? She couldn't answer that question definitively yet, as she had only just begun to question her actions, but she at least knew one thing. A true hero wouldn't see these devils as evil beings, not after studying them for a bit. No, instead, a true hero would be more likely to meet and become acquaintances with these new devils, these different devils. After all, if more devils were like them, then less humans would be abused by the faction as a whole, wouldn't they? Promoting harmonious coexistence instead of other harmful emotions and motivations. But to do all that, she had to lay down her own distrustful disposition first. She had to open dialogue, she had to believe that they were trustworthy. Suddenly, a hand fell on her shoulder and squeezed in reassurance. She couldn't stop the small smile that was growing on her face even if she tried. At least she had one supporter. So, with a surprising calmness, the battered teenage girl took that dangerous first step. "I am a hero," Yuki revealed, as if she was talking about something that was obvious. Rias, prepared to hear a lot of things, just blinked in response to this, processing the fantastical knowledge that was just passed on to her. Then she widened her eyes in shock. A human hero was standing right in front of her. At the moment, that hero didn't look too impressive, but it didn't change the fact that a sworn enemy of devilkind was standing in front of her, announcing her presence. The shock wore off the second that she realized that, despite the lack of a threat she held in her current state, there was a distinct possibility that the blonde helping her stand was also a hero. It seemed that her peerage had the same idea cross their minds as well, as they all began to get closer to their king in case hostilities arose, closing ranks against an external threat. Naruto quickly noticed the rising tension, raised one of his hands up in a placating manner before things got ugly. Whoa. Hold on there, weren't we gonna talk about this, Rias-san? Seriously, he was not looking for another fight so soon after the last one. Besides, pissing off another faction was just a stupid idea, and so was needlessly showing off his abilities while dealing with them. Rias snapped her attention back to Naruto with caution, who had already bent her knees a little to prepare for any fast movements required if hostilities emerged. "It seems that I was mistaken, Naruto-san. I'm sure that you can understand our hesitation about bringing age-long enemies with us." Naruto widened his eyes at that statement, connecting the dots. Enemies. Plural. She thought that he was a hero. "Rias-san, it seems you are a bit mistaken here. I'm not a hero. Only Nanaka-san here is a hero." Naruto tried to convince her earnestly. "And how do I know that you're telling the truth exactly? After all, I can tell that you're definitely human, and you're helping her right now, like a good ally. So what other explanation is there when one of those humans just so happens to take the mantle of hero?" Rias refuted, her guard not brought down at all. Naruto's expression slid from faintly nervous to deadpanned in a matter of seconds, before slowly using his hand to point at the girl to his side. "Because I just recently beat the crap out of her," he retorted. Rias blinked at the statement before gaining a light blush due to her embarrassment, as it made sense that they weren't on the same side considering the condition of the hero. Her wounds went beyond that of a spar between friends, since she was obviously in quite a lot of pain. Nanaka just twitched at the reminder of her recent defeat. "Yeah, we were enemies earlier today. But we came to an understanding after I beat her up, and I was helping her get to her house when you guys showed up. So you don't need to worry about having me as your enemy since I have no reason to fight you at all." Naruto eased the devils in front of him, hoping his logic would temper the tension here. "If anything, talking to you would be good since I finally get to find out what is going on with all of these supernatural factions." The devils all shared looks with one another, apparently checking with one another to see if they believed the blonde's story. "While I would advise caution, I think that he is telling the truth right now, Bucho," Akino advised, sparing the two humans a look. "Not lying," Kaneko agreed, her powerful ears at work. "Heartbeat is stable, not speeding up." The Gremry heiress said nothing as she listened to her two peerage members' counsel, moving her eyes back and forth between Naruto and Yuki. She quickly made her decision. "Very well, we will trust in your sincerity and believe that you mean us no harm, Naruto-san. We will all go back to my club room in Ko Academy and go over our interesting circumstances," Rias said finally, aware that she was taking a huge risk by taking them back to her home base. Then again, maybe not. After all, if all she had to fear was a beat-up hero, then the combined forces of her peerage would be more than enough to overwhelm her. Of that she was sure. It was the one that gave her the wounds that she was worried about. Idly waving her hand, the redhead reactivated the magic circle underfoot in order to transfer everyone back to the ORC base, where they could speak without fear of any normal humans listening in. The crimson circle then expanded, enveloping the ground under all those who were present. Then, in a blinding flash, they were all transported away. To their lack of knowledge, though, it failed to transport another soul who was watching nearby, attracted to the battleground like the Gremory group was. However, strangely enough, no one there even noticed his presence, despite their incredible abilities. Regardless, the figure, which turned out to be a young man, quickly left to tell his master about the knowledge he has obtained. Naruto blinked as he fell on his but when the transportation was over with, along with Yuki, who was also now sprawled on the floor, moaning in pain at her sudden reacquaintance with the ground. All the devils in the room looked on with amusement as the humans slowly stood back up, getting over their sudden and unpleasant feeling of being teleported. Naruto, ever curious about the supernatural, looked around and took note that the room he was in was pretty damn spooky and dark, utilizing candles and incense instead of light bulbs and air fresheners. Honestly, it's sorta what he would expect from a bad guy's lair, especially with all of the fancy furniture that was definitely not oriental in style. Naruto decided to take this time to study all of the devils there, having the chance to do so. There was a young woman with a buxom figure with very long black hair and violet eyes, standing beside the obvious leader of the group, probably as a second in command or something. Her hair, which was incredibly long, was tied in a long ponytail which reached all the way down to her legs, held thanks to her badass orange ribbon. There was another girl that was of similar build with Maria. She had hazel eyes and white hair which was styled in a bob cut except with several strands hanging on the sides of her face which was reaching her shoulders. The only male devil here was a good-looking guy with short light blonde hair and gray eyes. He had a mole under his left eye and carried himself like one of those gentlemen that Naruto read about. All in all, a very varied group of people. That wasn't even counting the apparent leader of the group. Gremory Rias, or was that Rias Gremory, was a young woman that had a similar build with the girl with the badass ribbon. She had long crimson hair, a couple of shades darker than Mio's which stretched to her thighs and in a hug that was defying gravity. She had green-blue eyes which was currently shining in amusement at the human's wandering gaze. Naruto finally ended his examination of the group and decided to start things off. Okay, so what is a devil exactly, Rias-san? Naruto asked to get things started. Almost as if a switch was turned on, the room suddenly gotten slightly darker with the lights becoming dimmer. The remaining light gave the devils on the other side of the room an almost eerie presence with the darkness covering parts of their faces. Naruto wondered if this was a thing with devils as he remembered Sona-san and her glasses. They just seemed to like their theatrics. Well, Uzumaki Naruto, to be blunt, devils are beings that live in a different dimension known as the underworld, chosen by the founder of our species, the original Mao. We are all, essentially, the descendants of the original Lucifer and his band of rebels against heaven, who utilize magic to combat our enemies. We are very powerful beings, Naruto-san. Rias explained, her tone getting lower as she continued. Yuki narrowed her eyes at this blatant admission of her species' power. What was Gremory up to? Just because she acknowledged that she wasn't all bad didn't mean that she trusted her to not use certain situations to her advantage. Naruto, oblivious to the change, nodded for her to continue. Devils have been fighting their biblical counterparts and sworn enemies, angels and fallen angels, for at least 2,000 years in a conflict simply known as the Great War. The conflict has only in recent times been called off due to a ceasefire, but the devil population has been decimated due to the many years of fighting. The problem has only recently been solved due to the introduction of the evil peace system, Rias claimed with her eyes locked onto Naruto's. The hero, wary at first, just found cause to be even more concerned as the devil emphasized her people's need for new blood. Connecting the dots in her head, the young human felt something click in her head when she finally realized what Gremory was aiming for. She was trying to get Uzumaki Naruto into her peerage. Clenching her teeth together, Yuki was about to take a step forward to warn him but stopped herself short. As much as she hated to admit it, Gremory wasn't using any magic or anything of the sort to influence him in any way, except through words. Despite how she was loath to admit it, she had no right to interfere in this instance. It was times like these that she hated her own moral compass. Naruto just stood there, soaking up all this information as Rias continued her explanation. The concept of a peerage, a term to describe those who are made subordinate to a king, was born from the evil peace system. The system itself uses chess pieces to change the genetic makeup of an individual and turn them into a devil and a servant of the possessor of the evil piece. For humans, it makes them far more powerful than what they were originally due to the fact that devils are naturally more stronger than humans, as well as live far longer. Eventually, when those reincarnated devils become strong enough, they can form their own peerages and achieve great wealth in the underworld, Rias said with a sly turn of the lips, eyeing the blonde's features for the telltale signs of interest. She thought that she was doing a good job in selling her case before she even suggested it, making him see the positives of becoming a devil without outright stating her wants. Hopefully, with just one more nudge, she could ensure her offer's success rate. The people you see around you are, as a matter of fact, members of my peerage. Unlike others though, I see my peerage as family, as my comrades and friends. They are people that I treasure, no matter what. The Gremry heiress took a breath, prepping herself for the final pitch. I don't know much about you, Naruto-san, but from what I've seen and heard, I'd like to think that we could understand and help one another out. Which is why, after everything I have said, I would like to ask you to join my peerage and become a part of that family. By this point, the Gremry heiress looked like the pitch-perfect example of a confident older woman who had her fingers wrapped around an inexperienced younger boy, exemplified by her borderline coy smile. What about her offer wasn't attractive? Longer life, more strength, promise of camaraderie and respect. She was sure that he would accept her offer. Nah. And when he did, she could. Huh? Rias asked, dumbfounded. Her visage of confidence and experience fell apart completely at the stupefied expression. Did he just say no? Yuki, on the other hand, stared at Naruto with wide eyes, shocked and more than a little pleased that he rejected the redhead's offer, though she honestly wasn't sure why. Well, all of that sounds nice and all, but won't I have to give up being human? Not that being human is great and all, but it is a part of who I am. A piece of what makes Uzumaki Naruto well Uzumaki Naruto. While I would love to get a family, I don't want to get it while giving up a part of me. Besides, I have a dream that I have to fulfill, and becoming a devil would be a big detriment to that dream. So thanks but no thanks, Rias-san, Naruto said simply, not at all wavering from his decision. It was a nice offer, really, but he didn't want to give up a piece of himself just so he could get something else in return. It just wasn't who he was. Instead, he would earn everything that he could through his own blood and sweat. That was his usual way of getting things done. Rias just stared at the blonde for a moment before sighing in disappointment, her shoulders sagging a bit. She was so looking forward to getting another peerage member that she honestly didn't consider that he would refuse her. However, Rias perked up at Naruto's voice, turning back to him to listen to his words. It doesn't mean that we can't become friends and allies, right? Naruto asked easily with a grin. Feeling her eyelids open just a bit wider than usual, the redhead waited for the other shoe to drop. She was certain that the blonde in front of her didn't just reject a way to improve his body in every way imaginable and become a part of her family just to offer her his hand in friendship. Why would he go for the lesser of two options? What was the point in that? From what she knew of most humans, most would jump at the chance to live longer and improve their body, especially if she was genuinely sincere about him becoming a part of her family. So she was understandably stupefied that the teenage boy gazed upon her expectantly, waiting for her response. He wanted to be friends. Allies? Just like that? He made it sound so easy. Still, she couldn't stop the amused chuckle that came out of her mouth due to the craziness of it all. He denied a chance at being stronger, faster, better in almost every way just because he didn't want to lose a piece of himself. Then he turned around and claimed to want to be friends. Who did that? Rias stopped chuckling and looks at Naruto with a smile. I suppose that will have to do, Naruto-san. Notably, the lower and more adult-like tone of her voice had faded once she recovered from his offer, and instead was replaced by her normal tone. Naruto decided that he liked the normal Rias better. Turning to look at Yuki, who was standing off to the side and watching the events unfold at a distance, the shinobi motioned to her to come towards the assembled group. Yuki raised an eyebrow in response, before moving slowly to the blonde as he turned to now regard the entire group. Everyone, Naruto said with a grin. I have a proposal to make. Naruto would share his proposal. And Ko, as they say, was never the same again. Naruto carefully tiptoed inside his house, peeking around to check if anyone was still awake at this late hour. Thankfully for him, the lights were off, and he heard no sounds. It seemed that he was in the clear. Slowly walking inside the house, the blonde casually dropped the groceries onto the kitchen floor in order to put it away in the fridge, making sure to be as quiet as possible. With this accomplished, he then stealthily made his way back to the living room in order to get to his room and rest. Honestly, he lucked out, since he managed to find a grocery store that was open this late at night to gather some necessary foodstuffs and stuff. Now he could just sleep the rest of the night away without much worry. Well, mostly. Now that he had made his proposal, and somehow pulled everyone, devil and hero alike, into it, now he had the enviable problem of making sure that it stuck. That would be a hell of a thing to keep stable. Before the shinobi could retreat into the safety of his room by passing by the living room, an irregular shape at the edge of his sight caught his attention. Tilting his head, he easily noticed something irregular on the couch and froze. Mio, Naruto muttered. On one of his comfortable couches, Naruto's Mio was just laying there, resting. Well, sleeping was more like it, but why was she there instead of in her new room? It took all of a few seconds for something to click inside his head, leaving his eyes to widen in genuine shock. Was she waiting for him to come home? Throughout his life, no one had ever waited for him to come home before. This was just an absolute first for the young man. So much so that he wasn't sure how he should take it. Naruto's eyes fluttered, blinking away the faint bit of glassiness that nearly overtook them for a second at the warm feeling spreading in his heart at the gesture. Rebounding quickly, the youth shuffled past her and went to his room, grabbing a spare blanket to place on the resting redhead. Cutting himself off mid-action, he thought better of it and snagged two. Returning to the living room, he then placed one on her and tucked her in softly so that she wouldn't wake up. Then he went to the chair that was next to the couch and sat down. Keeping himself silent, he then placed the blanket on himself and grinned fondly at the girl on the couch. "Thanks a bunch, Mio," Naruto remarked as quietly as a whisper, settling into his seat to fall into the confines of sleep. His last thoughts before he drifted off were of acceptance. As far as he was concerned, these two freeloaders could stay as long as they needed. If he couldn't bring himself to regret saving the two devils in the forest on that fateful day, which seemed so long ago, then he probably never would. To many people, the area that a certain wealthy young devil was traversing would be considered to be cold and dank. Even to him it was so, as he wasn't used to dealing with desolate and unforgiving accommodations until recently. But then again, why would he? He was a high-class devil after all, so he deserved only the best the underworld had to offer. But he would tolerate it. Or rather, he had to tolerate it. His life was at stake if he made his benefactor upset. Even though the young devil did all he could to earn his new master's favor, it just seemed that he never held his loyal servant in such high regard at all. Peering through the opening and the end of the hidden cavern that he was traversing, orange eyes narrowed, a calculating glint within their depths. Maybe he could change that after this meeting. Reaching the end of the cavern, the youth halted in front of a shadowed figure that was standing tall on an elevated position in front of him, surrounded by the darkened area that helped protect his anonymity. Not even a devil's sensitive eyes could quite pierce through the shadows to see his features. Face to face with his benefactor, the high-class devil bowed his head deferentially, waiting for his lord to speak. "And? What have you discovered that is so important as to drag me away from our base of operations?" the deep voice rumbled. To the young devil, it felt like the air itself shook in accordance to his lord's voice, his own body trembling in response. "There has been a change, Lucifer-sama," spoke the young devil, keeping his voice deferential. "As of now, there is another individual that has decided to protect the daughter of the original Lucifer, and he seemed powerful, Lucifer-sama." His pride was strong, but it was nowhere near as strong as his sense of self-preservation. "Who? So the girl has another that is willing to back her, HM? Very well, for now, it is of no concern. Is the sisters of the current Maos still in Ko?" the voice asked. "Yes, they still reside in Ko town." His loyal servant answered him, sure of this, until he ventured to glance up to look at his master. Pardon me for asking, Lucifer-sama, but what are you planning to do with them?" Of course, he was referring to the younger siblings of two of the current Maos, Lucifer and Leviathan. But seemingly deciding to ignore his servant's query, the powerful being known as simply Lucifer turned away from the lower devil, sounding almost whimsical when he spoke. "What am I doing to do? Well, it should be obvious I'm going to start a second civil war in the underworld and take back what's mine," the voice said with conviction and certainty. Behind him, the young devil smiled darkly at the proclamation, contemplating the power and prestige that he would receive due to being a part of the initial formation of the new order. At least until the voice spoke up again. Now leave me, or don't you have a nun to break, Diodora? The remainder of the nun that he was going to break eagerly brought about a sick smile to the young devil's face. Oh, the delicious screams he would get when he... I said, begone, you cretin! The voice bellowed again, breaking the young Astaroth out of his sick fantasies, getting him to scramble out of the cavern of his lord. All was silent for a moment following the youth's retreat, which was only broken once a feminine voice spoke up in clear derision. Is it okay to let such a nasty little creature live? Asked the feminine voice, the disgusted tone in her voice obvious. Instead of the shadowed figure in the middle responding, it was another voice, a masculine one, which rose up in response to answer her query. Don't worry, he will outlive his usefulness soon enough. Then I'm sure you will get the pleasure of destroying him yourself, won't you? One more voice rose up from the darkness in response. Not that it matters anyway. Soon enough, we will destroy the pretenders calling themselves Mouse, and claim the titles for ourselves, as it should be. And it's all thanks to you, my lord. The last voice, also obviously belonging to a man, spoke as such to Shadowed Man, who was staying quiet as he listened to his comrades. To his fellow heirs. The time is approaching, my friends. Soon we shall strike against the pretenders and take back what is rightfully ours. Our government, our underworld, our people. Prepare yourselves accordingly. The cloaked man finished, his determination to complete this task as crystal clear as the stars in the unseen night sky. As one, his companions hidden in the shadows enthusiastically voiced their support for the strongest among them.